Chapter 218. Let's go. Yin Jian stood up and patted her dusty clothes. She took the lead and walked towards the small hole that was blown up. When the others saw this, they all followed suit. Yi Yanting had fainted. Ling Tianhao had no choice but to stay even though he did not want to care about her. At this moment, other than the two of them, the others continued to move forward. There was no way back. The only thing left for them was to move forward. Tap, tap, tap. The surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of footsteps could be heard, and the endless darkness that could be seen when one looked up. Splash, splash, splash. There seemed to be the sound of flowing water in the distance. There's the sound of flowing water over there. Everyone moved forward quickly in surprise. There's also human voices. Yin Jian narrowed her eyes. She took the lead and suddenly said this. Everyone was stunned out of habit. No one heard human voices, except for Yin Jian. However, after the incident where Yin Jian directly blew up the tunnel, everyone had tacitly chosen to believe her words. As expected, after walking for about 4 to 5 minutes, mixed human voices came from the other end of the tunnel. Yin Jian and the others could feel it as well. The passage was gradually widening again, until finally, a mud hole the size of a basketball court appeared in front of everyone's eyes. On this empty land, groups of people and horses were all gathered together. Some even set up tents on this open space. Soon, everyone realized that these people were the ones who entered the tomb and did not come out again. Beside this huge mud hole, there was a stream of water that came from nowhere. It flowed out from the first corner, and then flowed out from the last corner. The most amazing thing was that this stream of water, which came from an unknown source, was filled with lively little fish and shrimps. There were quite a lot of them. This was the world of the underground people, not to mention Bojan and the others. Even Yin Jian could not help but smile. At this moment, Sun Jianxiong and the others seemed to have seen someone they knew in the crowd. Professor Su. Sun Jianxiong and the others rushed forward. You guys are here too? The man called Dr. Su was full of energy. He was about 50 or 60 years old, and was a very energetic old man. Professor Su was also stunned when he saw Sun Jianxiong and the others. It was obvious that Sun Jianxiong and the others had been sent to the tomb by Z country to look for Professor Su, who had also been buried. It could be seen that Professor Su held a high position in Z country and was highly valued. Professor Su, what's going on here? Why didn't anyone come out of the tomb? Sun Jianxiong asked. Yin Jian and the others stood in the distance and listened. Professor Su pointed at a stone door carved with dragons and phoenixes. He sighed and said, It's not that we can't go back, it's that no one wants to. When everyone heard this, they were instantly stunned. Professor Su explained the whole story in detail. After the first person to enter the tomb discovered this place, he refused to leave. There was one reason. There were a few ancient characters engraved on the stone door, with the dragon and phoenix carvings. The experts and scholars studied it for several days, and finally deciphered the translation of the ancient characters. The translated meaning of the words on the stone door was, Pass through this stone door, and you will know all the secrets of the sandalwood box. Of course, those who wanted to pass through this stone door had to stay here for a whole year. Everyone present was here to decipher the secrets of the sandalwood box. Of course, they refused to leave. Moreover, there were large numbers of fish and prawns in the flowing water. Once they stayed here, they could catch fish and prawns and cook them. They did not have to worry about starving to death. In the eyes of outsiders, the people who entered the tomb had already become horrifying skeletons. Professor Su, since you're here, why don't you contact the outside world? Sun Jianxiong asked the key question. Professor Su shook his head and smiled. There's no signal here. After he said that, everyone took out their communicators and looked. There was no signal. Yin Jian came over while everyone was still in shock. She looked at Professor Su and asked, May I ask if you've seen a handsome man who's about 19 years old and is 185 meters tall? There are 2 people with him. She was naturally asking about CE. She looked around but still could not find him. She could not help but worry. Chapter 219. Sun Jianxiong, Bojan, and the rest were stunned by Professor Su's words. Sun Jianxiong in particular was the first to realize that something was amiss, so he continued questioning Professor Su. That's not right, Professor Su. You said that one has to stay here for a year to pass through the stone door. But even if this tomb was excavated first, the person who entered the tomb had only stayed here for a few months at most, right? What I mean is, how could that young man have already entered the stone door? Sun Jinxiong asked out of curiosity. After all of them, including Yun Jian, had just made their way here. It could be said that they knew nothing about the recent happenings in the tomb. Let me finish first. Professor Su gulped. He immediately became spirited, looking at the group with a solemn gaze, and continued. You can pass through the stone door by staying here for a year. That's only one option. So there's another option? This time, Yun Jian asked. Professor Su then looked at Yun Jian and nodded. That's right. As he spoke, Professor Su frowned and pointed at an open stone cave beside the stone door. This stone cave is another way to pass through other than the stone door, Professor Su said. Bo Zhan and Fu Xian were both expert grave robbers, so they were well versed in mechanisms. Fu Xian was the first to notice that the stone cave was unusual. Fu Xian shouted in shock. That stone cave has a monstrous mechanism in it. As he spoke, he ran over to check out the cave entrance, then returned to the group. Let alone a person, even a fly would find it difficult to pass through this cave. Fu Xian was deeply shocked when he said this. That's right. Professor Su nodded. No one believed it at first, and insisted on passing through the stone cave first, saying that they didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open. Professor Su continued, his expression turning solemn. In the end, without exception, all of them died tragically in this cave. Their flesh was mangled, their bodies pierced by thousands of arrows. When the group heard this, they could not help but shudder. He passed, Yun Jian said after listening to Professor Su from the side. It was not a question, but a confirmation. He must have passed. Yes, only that young man and his two subordinates passed through the cave. When Professor Su said this, his entire body was filled with an unprecedented excitement. None of the people gathered here were ordinary people, and there were many assassins and secret agents. However, those who insisted on entering the cave and didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open all died tragically in the cave. CE was the only one who passed. On the other hand, the mechanisms in this cave were set up one after another. It had to be said that the tomb builder was very powerful. The mechanism he built would only activate when a creature wanted to pass through. Furthermore, it could be used repeatedly. In other words, even if the mechanism was used once, it could still be used hundreds or thousands of times. Yun Jian's lips curled up even more. She gently pursed her lips and her smile became even more unbridled. You guys stay here, I'll go look for him. Yun Jian looked straight at the people in front of her. Her casual words caused everyone present to be dumbfounded. What? Yun Jian, you want to go through that cave? Sun Jinxiong cried out involuntarily. This isn't a joke. Bo Zhan followed up. Professor Su, on the other hand, looked at Yun Jian fiercely. She was only 15 or 16 years old, right? Did she really have the ability to go through that cave? It should be known that those who had tried to pass through the hole, but had failed and died tragically were all internationally renowned figures. There was even one person, who was ranked 6th on the international secret agent list. Even that person did not pass through that cave. Chapter 220. Little girl, you want to go through that cave too? Don't you know how many people have died in that cave? Only the last batch of people who didn't want to take the risk stayed behind and stayed here, waiting for the stone door to open. Professor Su took a deep breath. Then, Professor Su used the tone of an elder reprimanding a junior, and continued to lecture Yun Jian. This is not a child's play. Only that young man and his two subordinates have succeeded in breaking through this cave. Life is precious. How can you waste your hard-earned life like this? Professor Su was sure that Yun Jian would not be able to pass through the mechanism in this cave. If she forced her way through, she would end up with 1,000 arrows piercing through her heart. After all, Yun Jian was so young that he could not convince himself even if he wanted to. What's more, he was a scientific researcher. To believe that a little girl like Yun Jian, who had not even reached puberty, would be able to break through that cave. That was a fool's dream. Although Professor Su was doing this for Yunjian's sake, he did not want to see anyone make unnecessary sacrifices. But when the words came out of his mouth, his tone became not so pleasing. That's right, Yunjian. Don't do something so risky. Professor Su must have his reasons. Sun Jianxiong helped Professor Su to persuade Yunjian. Bo Zhan and Fu Xian did not believe that Yunjian could pass through this cave. But the two of them did not say anything. As for Bear Might and the others, they simply remained silent. Bear Might was silent because he had already guessed Yunjian's shocking identity. If Yunjian was really one of the kosher mercenaries, how could a mere cave trap her? If she wanted to pass through that cave, it would be as easy as lifting a finger. Do you think I would joke around with my life? Yunjian sneered. She continued, I'm just letting you know, I'm not asking for your permission. She, Yunjian, had never sought permission from others before. Yunjian's arrogant words made everyone present stop talking. Our Professor Su is doing this for your own good. How can a little girl like you be so ungrateful? At this moment, a woman standing behind Dr. Su yelled at Yunjian to defend Dr. Su. The woman's name was Jiang Jiaoxue. Jiang Jiaoxue was Professor Su's assistant. It was normal for a renowned scholar like Professor Su to have a few assistants around him. Jiang Jiaoxue was proud of being able to work under Professor Su, so she was arrogant and domineering. When she saw Yunjian refuting Professor Su, who she respected, she couldn't help but retaliate. Yunjian merely curled her lips slightly and ignored Jiang Jiaoxue. She merely glanced at Xiong Wei and the others and said, all of you stay here. As she spoke, she walked towards the cave. You can't go. You can't go. Seeing that Yunjian didn't listen to his advice and hated her for not listening to him, Professor Su was even more annoyed. However, Bo Zhan noticed that Xiong Wei and the others who belonged to the kosher mercenaries, along with Yunjian, were not panicking at all. Bo Zhan was observant, and he couldn't help but look at the girl, who was walking towards the cave. He saw that Yunjian had arrived in front of the cave. She lifted her leg and jumped into the cave while Bo Zhan, Professor Su, and everyone else who was waiting for the stone door to open gasped in shock and fear. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. As expected, after Yunjian entered the cave's mechanism was activated. Countless flying arrows rained down and were aimed at Yunjian. Just when everyone was imagining Yunjian's tragic ending, Bo Zhan flipped over. With a few somersaults and agile steps, Yunjian leaped across the cave where countless experts had died. She turned a corner and vanished from the spot swiftly. She. Professor Su's mouth was agape in shock, and he couldn't catch his breath. Chapter 221. Such skills. No wonder she's the number one in the kosher mercenaries. Even Bear Might could not help but praise Yunjian's agility. As he spoke, Bear Might could not help but admire and respect Yunjian. What did you say? She's from the kosher mercenaries? Professor Su, who was standing aside, heard Bear Might's exclamation and could not help but shout. Bo Zhan, on the other hand, heard another word in Bear Might's words. Number one. Yunjian is the number one in the kosher mercenaries. Bo Zhan asked Bear Might, dumbfounded. Ha! Who would have thought that Xiong Wei would just snort at these people who had turned pale with fright, ignoring them? Bear Might thought to himself that if these people knew Yunjian's true identity, they would faint from fright. Even so, it was enough to shock Bo Zhan, Professor Su, and the rest. Even if Professor Su was not involved in these matters, he had heard of the prestige of the kosher mercenaries. There were only a few people who could be called the number one in the kosher mercenaries, and each of them definitely had a place in the international rankings. It was no wonder that Yunjian would act the way she did earlier. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. Jiang Jiaoxue, on the other hand, clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. From Professor Su and the rest's shock, she could tell that the little girl who spoke rudely just now was actually a big shot. No, she could not accept it. But in the end, Jiang Jiaoxue could only swallow her anger. On the other hand, Yunjian passed the first checkpoint of the cave effortlessly and switched on the only lighter she had to light up the path ahead before she continued to move forward alone. Compared to when she was just reborn, her skills and agility had improved by leaps and bounds. Of course, this was also due to the results of her recent training in the military training camp. Tap tap tap. Stepping on the water that flowed out of nowhere, Yunjian kept moving forward. But the strange thing was that after she passed through the small mechanism at the entrance of the cave, nothing dangerous happened. Even so, Yunjian did not forget to maintain her initial vigilance. No one could predict what would appear in the next second, or what they would encounter in this pitch-black tunnel. Yunjian walked for about 15 minutes when she heard the sound of rushing water. She quickened her pace. After turning a corner, a bright light flashed in front of her eyes. Bright light? Yunjian frowned suspiciously. When she saw the scenery in front of her again, she had reached the end of the cave tunnel. The end of the cave was actually a world of its own. And if she guessed correctly, she had already left the tomb. Because when they walked out from the end of the tunnel, the scorching sun was right above their heads. The exit? Out? Could it be that the so-called secret of the sandalwood? And the people waiting bitterly for the stone door to open were just waiting for a secret that did not exist? Just as Yunjian was thinking this, a tall and handsome figure suddenly rushed past her. Just as Yunjian was about to retaliate, a familiar scent wafted into her nose. The next second, she was pulled into the other party's embrace. Why are you here? Ce frowned and pulled Yunjian under his protection. Yunjian felt a wave of dizziness, but she did not push Ce away. She did not feel that there was anything wrong with this. Instead, she leaned her head against Ce's chest. You lost contact, so I came to look for you, she whispered. Did Shuang tell you privately? Ce's clear voice came from above Yunjian. There was a trace of anger in his voice, as well as a trace of joy that even he himself did not notice. Chapter 222. Yunjian buried her head in Ce's chest. She then added, I wanted to look for you myself. A smile appeared on Ce's handsome face. He looked down at Yunjian and reached out to stroke Yunjian's head. Thank goodness you're all right. He had managed to get past the traps in the cave, even though it was a piece of cake for him. However, he would still be worried for Yunjian, even if she was confident that she would be able to get past such a dangerous trap. Yunjian's cheeks flushed instantly when he stroked her head for no reason. She did not know why she did not push Ce away at that moment. Ce's pleasant scent wafted into her nose. Ahem ahem. An untimely cough interrupted Yunjian and Ce's embrace. Yunjian quickly wriggled out of Ce's embrace, her heart thumping wildly. This was the first time she had been caught hugging a man in a messy position. Slaying God, the king of international secret agents and the world's #1, was blushing because of this? Young master, we have a new discovery. Adam, who had just interrupted the intimacy between the two of them, touched the bridge of his nose, his handsome face carrying a hint of teasing. Their young master was really interested in this woman. Would this woman become the young madam of their young master? Ce's lips curled slightly. He flashed a satisfied smile at an angle that Yunjian could not see. Let's go. Ce held Yunjian's hand. Feeling the warmth of his large palm, Yunjian did not reject him, nor was she shy. She regained her senses and asked him seriously, Where are we? How did we get out of the cave? Could it be that the secret of the sandalwood box is not in this ancient tomb? Could it be that the people below had been waiting and anticipating for nothing? Ce frowned. He looked down at Yunjian and said without holding back, I suspect that we've entered another world. Another world? Yunjian asked in surprise. That's why I got Adam and Emo's son to investigate just now, Ce said with a mesmerizing smile on his face. His handsome face twitched slightly and he continued, Now we have a new discovery. His patient explanation made Adam, who was leading the team, pause. Since when did young master have such a gentle and patient side? Adam was stunned. He led Yunjian and Ce through the forest, and finally arrived in front of a huge rock. There were a few lines of ancient words carved on the rock. Emo's son was standing next to the rock. Emo's son was looking at the words on the rock. Seeing Adam leading Ce and Yunjian over, Emo's son called out to Ce, Young master. Ce nodded and looked at Emo's son pointing to the rock in front of them. he said to him and Yunjian. The words on this rock do not belong to any country or dynasty. I can't translate its meaning. Emo-sun frowned bitterly as he spoke. Ce couldn't help but take a second look at the words that even Emo-sun couldn't translate. This is... Yunjian suddenly stretched out her hand. She took 2 steps forward and placed her hand in the middle of the words on the rock under Ce's suspicious and Adam and Emo-sun's surprised gazes. The sandalwood box is an ancient divine artifact of the Yulong continent. The person who owns it must have supreme divine power and the ability to bring the dead back to life. Yunjian looked at the words on the rock and read them out loud. After she finished speaking, even she was stunned. Ce, Adam and Emo-sun were even more surprised. Chapter 223. Yunjian didn't know how she could understand the words engraved on the rock. It was just that when she first saw them, she suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. Then, she read them out based on her feelings. Ce turned to look at Yunjian. Seeing that her eyebrows were tightly knitted together, he reached out his slender fingers and smoothed them out for her. There was a gentle light in his eyes. Beside him, Emo-sun looked at Yunjian solemnly and asked, "You can understand these words?" Yunjian shifted her gaze away from Ce. She shook her head and nodded at Emo-sun. "It feels like déjà vu. When I saw these words, I translated them out of habit." Yulong mainland, Ce murmured softly with a raised brow looking at the bold words on the rock. "Then this world is the Yulong continent you mentioned," Ce said in a firm tone. The reason why Ce was so sure that this place wasn't the world they originally lived in was because the flowers, grass, water, and wood of this world were different from the original world. This was Ce's feeling as well, so he told him directly. This was definitely not the place they originally lived in. It was the same as Yunjian's intuition that the words on the rock were translated. Ce even felt that this world made him feel as if he originally belonged here. "Young master, the sandalwood box has been set up. We can go now." Adam, who had been sent out to set up the sandalwood box, came back and said to Ce. Ce nodded slightly. "Let's go." Ce held Yunjian's small hand and walked back the way they came. The sandalwood box originally belonged here. He was just returning it to its rightful owner. As for where this place was, it was no longer within their scope of consideration. Yunjian followed Ce's tall figure as they walked back step by step. She glanced at him from time to time, feeling warm in her heart. However, no one knew that their conflict with the Yulong continent was far from over. Of course, this was a story for later. Somewhere in the Yulong mainland, a 10-meter-tall crystal ball stood in the middle of a large hall. Crack! Suddenly there was a loud noise, and a huge crack appeared on the tall crystal ball. In the next second, the entire crystal ball miraculously collapsed. "I'm back." The sorcerer god had reappeared. The sorcerer tribe has been waiting for thousands of years. "Sorcerer god, you're finally back." In the center of the hall, a young girl around 16 or 17 years old shouted excitedly. She was dressed in black clothes. She had waited for thousands of years in the sorcerer tribe. It had been thousands of years since the sorcerer god had fallen. When the sorcerer god had fallen, she had promised that she would return in 1,000 years. The breaking of the crystal ball signified the return of the sorcerer god. Yunjian and Ce had easily exited the cave's mechanism and returned to where Professor Su, Bojan and the rest were. As soon as they saw Yunjian and the other 3 coming out of the cave, everyone crowded around them. Everyone wanted to know what secrets were hidden behind the stone door. "Miss Yin, did you find anything inside?" Professor Su was the first to rush up and ask. Even the way he addressed her had changed from a little girl to Miss Yin. "You guys can go take a look for yourselves." Yunjian's lips curved into a half-smile. Her answer elicited more dissatisfaction from the group. Everyone knew that they did not have the ability to break through the cave, so they came to ask her. Jiang Jiaoxue had been tolerating Yunjian for a long time. Seeing this, she could not help but be the first to shout. "It's because we can't pass through the cave that we're asking you. How can you be like this? So what if you tell us what you saw inside? It won't hurt you at all, right?" "Little girl, you're quite capable, but it's not right to be so arrogant." Jiang Jiaoxue dared to speak to Yunjian this way, because she had caught a glimpse of Ce not far away. Yun Jian was not the only one who had entered the cave. Why was she so arrogant? Therefore, Jiang Jiaoxue was certain that a handsome person like Ce would definitely tell her what had happened inside. She turned around and asked Ce, "Hey, handsome, I saw that you've been in the cave too. Can you tell us what happened inside?" Chapter 224. Jiang Jiaoxue was very pretty. Although she wasn't as pretty as Yun Jian, she had a pair of long, fair legs that men loved. She was almost 1.7 meters tall and stood out from the crowd. Coupled with her good looks, she was the campus belle of the school even when she was still in school. In addition, Jiang Jiaoxue had excellent grades since she was a student, so she became Professor Su's assistant at a young age. This was something that Jiang Jiaoxue was proud of. One had to admit that Jiang Jiaoxue was a woman that men would fall in love with. Not only did she have a good figure and good looks, but she also had excellent grades. Jiang Jiaoxue also admitted that there weren't many men who could be seduced by her. She saw that Ce was so handsome and had shown good skills, so she took the opportunity to seduce him. At the same time, she wanted to ask about everything that Ce, Yun Jian, and the others had seen after entering the cave. That was why Jiang Jiaoxue threw Ce a seductive glance. She even felt that it was advisable to sacrifice her beauty when necessary. After all, no ordinary man could resist her charm. Unfortunately, Ce wasn't an ordinary man. Get lost. Jiang Jiaoxue was feeling smug and thought that Ce would answer her. Then, she would sneer at Yun Jian and provoke Ce. Suddenly, Ce spat out a word, instantly shattering all of Jiang Jiaoxue's fantasies. This one word was shouted in front of everyone. It was obvious that Ce didn't take Jiang Jiaoxue seriously at all. Huh? Yun Jian crossed her arms and watched. She already knew that this would be the result. Jiang Jiaoxue was stunned by Ce's shout. She didn't react for a long time. Unfortunately, Jiang Jiaoxue wasn't an ordinary woman. Her skin was so thick that even bullets couldn't pierce it. When she came back to her senses, she moved closer to Ce again. This time, she even wanted to move her body towards Ce. "Handsome, don't be so fierce. We're all on the same side. If you're so fierce, I'll be scared." As she spoke, Jiang Jiaoxue wanted to take a big step forward and press her whole body against Ce. She felt that Ce had just shouted at her in front of so many people, making her lose face. She didn't believe that there was a man who couldn't be subdued by a woman. Despite Jiang Jiaoxue's appearance, she was a famous social butterfly in the upper class. What kind of man would not be obedient in her hands? In spite of it, before Jiang Jiaoxue could take 2 steps closer to Ce, she was shocked by Adam who stood beside him. Jiang Jiaoxue wasn't the only one who was shocked. Everyone present was shocked as well. Adam took out a desert eagle from his waist and pointed it at Jiang Jiaoxue, who was about to step forward. He threatened, "If you dare to take another step closer to our young master, I'll blow your head off." Then, Adam fired a shot at Jiang Jiaoxue's position. The gun whizzed towards Jiang Jiaoxue. Amidst Jiang Jiaoxue's threatening screams, the gun flew past her side and finally hit the mud wall. He really did shoot. Jiang Jiaoxue was so scared that her face turned pale. If even Ce's subordinates dared to do this, she was sure that if she were to do something again in the next second, the bullet would go through her head instead. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but tremble. Ce held Yun Jian's hand again under everyone's gaze. He didn't say a word and walked out without looking back. Chapter 225. Seeing that Yun Jian, Ce and the rest had left the stone door, some of the people who had been waiting for a long time felt that it was impossible. There might really be no treasure behind the stone door. If there was really a treasure or the secret of the sandalwood box, then how could Yun Jian and Ce come out of the stone cave so quickly? Hence, a portion of the people left with Yun Jian and Ce. As the saying goes, 1 spreads to 10, and 10 spreads to 100. In the end, there were only a few people left waiting for the stone door to open. In fact, they could be counted with one hand. If they knew that there was another world behind the stone door, and that the sandalwood box was there, they would have raced their brains to get in. It was a pity that they did not know about these things. Moreover, when Yun Jian and the rest walked out, it was as if there was really nothing behind the stone door. Hence, The group felt that it was futile to wait any longer, so they left one by one. When they reached the stairs, it was the first trap they encountered when they went down the dry well. Since the mechanical puppet would automatically shut down once it walked in, and the activation mechanism was outside, the group of people were at a loss as to what to do. How are we going to get out? A young man who had lived here for a long time asked. Yunjian, did you see any traps? Bojan saw the situation and moved to stand beside Yunjian. No, Yunjian replied faintly. Then she added, but I have a way to get out. Once they heard that Yunjian had a way out, the group gathered around her. Yunjian was now different in their hearts. She was someone who had the ability to break through the stone cave full of arrows. Even though Yunjian looked very young, what she had done earlier was enough to convince everyone. What is it? Bojan asked immediately, his eyes filled with anticipation. From the beginning, Yunjian's performance was different from the rest. Bojan was an expert grave robber himself, but he had never seen someone like Yunjian, who could see through the traps with just one look. Hence, he placed his hopes on Yunjian. It's simple. Yunjian's lips curled slightly, and she said in the next second, if we can't get out, then we'll blow it up. Yunjian's words caused an uproar among the crowd. Bojan, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth. He recalled the scene of Yunjian blowing up the mud wall, and his heart twitched uncontrollably. Wasn't it too casual for the kosher mercenaries to carry bombs around and set them off at any time? When Yunjian took out the last bullet she had looted from Bear Might, however, those who had never seen a bomb before were stunned. F***ck, he even brought a bomb into the tomb. That's amazing. Someone said with deep emotion. Boom. Just as that person exclaimed, Yunjian had already blown open the door of the confinement mechanism and walked out with CE. Although the dry well was very high, it was a piece of cake for Yunjian, CE, Adam and Emo's son, who had been training all year round. Hence they quickly climbed out. Outside the dry well, Yu Bufan had been hesitating outside the dry well ever since his two good friends, Bojan and Fu Xian, brought Yunjian and the rest into the tomb. He was very worried that his two friends would never return after entering the tomb. Even the communicator in his hand showed that there was no signal on their side. He paced back and forth anxiously and helplessly. Bufan, don't you know the truth of that rumor? These people are going into the tomb one by one. Aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths? How long has it been? Look at the people who went into the tomb. Are there still people coming out? Even if there are still people alive, they must have starved to the point that only a pile of bones is left. Someone stood in front of Yu Bufan and advised him. This person suddenly saw Yu Bufan looking at the dry well in shock. He followed Yu Bufan's gaze suspiciously and saw Yunjian and CE jumping out of the dry well one after another. Chapter 226. Yu Bufan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw Yunjian jumping out of the dry well so easily. You actually, how did you? The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. How could someone who had entered this tomb come back alive? This was different from what the rumors said. Just as this person finished speaking, Adam and Mawson jumped out of the dry well one after another with a plop sound. Both of them were skilled as they stood behind CE without making a sound after exiting the well. You guys actually came out alive? This is a tuma. The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier pointed at Yunjian, and the rest with a trembling finger. One had to know that the first person to excavate this tomb had already been down for half a year, and there were many people who had continued to enter the tomb. But this tomb was like a black hole that no one could return from. No one who had gone down had ever come back up. In the end, all the rumors that this tomb was haunted or evil had spread. This made those who wanted to enter the tomb shrink back, who didn't cherish their own lives. But what did he see today? Someone had climbed out of the dry well alive? This was simply a world-class miracle. Why? We can't live? Yunjian raised her eyebrows and smiled at the person, looking relaxed and refreshed. When she knew that CE had met with an accident, she was really shocked. But now that CE was fine, her heart was at ease. Yunjian, have you seen Bojan and Fu Xian? Yu Bufan walked towards Yunjian with a frown. He was naturally worried about his two good friends. Now that he saw Yun Jian and the rest come out, he couldn't help but ask her with a sigh of relief. Aren't they climbing? Yun Jian turned sideways to let Yu Bufan have a clear view of the dry well. They saw a pair of hands suddenly climbing and grabbing onto the rim of the dry well, then kicking hard. Everyone saw a person suddenly appear in front of them. At this moment, he was struggling to climb out of the well. Once Bojan climbed out of the well, he waved his hand to wipe off his cold sweat. He turned to look at Yun Jian and sighed. Why is this well so high? I can see how easy it was for all of you to get out. If I knew that climbing would be so tiring, I should have asked you to ask Bufan to throw a rope down to save us. When Yu Bufan and the other man heard this, they noticed a word. When Bojan said we, did that mean that there were quite a number of people still alive? Both of them turned pale with fright. In the end, with Bojan's help, they found a group of people to rescue everyone from the dry well. In the end, when Bojan and the rest were brought up, Bojan merely described Yun Jian's capabilities. In the end, when Bojan went to look for Yun Jian to explain to everyone, Yun Jian and Ce were long gone. At the same time, Bear Mite's group was also present. Yun Jian had already robbed Bear Mite in his men's off-road vehicle, and was rushing back to Country Z's airport with Ce and the rest. Bear Mite and his men who were robbed were on the brink of tears, but once they thought of Yun Jian's identity, they could only accept the fact that they were robbed by her. At the airport, Adam and Mo Sun were sent to work by Ce. Ce, on the other hand, boarded the plane back to Country Z's Longmen City with Yun Jian. What they did not know was that what happened in the catacomb in the coming days would make international headlines. Chapter 227. Since they had prepared an excuse beforehand, neither Qin Yiru nor the school found it odd when Yun Jian disappeared for the past few days. After Yun Jian had settled down, she received news from Zhang Jifan. The renovation of the shop was done. What was lacking now was a channel to import cars. Yun Jian had already contacted the channel to import cars. Once the shop was done, she sent a luring witch to contact the relevant personnel. Furthermore, Zhang Jifan was the one who contacted all the relevant personnel. Since it was a car dealership, the sales volume of cars was not high in 1998. By the standards of some families in this era, cars were considered a high consumable. Not only did the purchase of a car require a constant supply of fuel, the car itself was not cheap. In addition, there was the need to pay taxes and a series of related matters. Buying a car like this was not an easy task. Therefore, she was planning to sell it to the rich and powerful bosses at the moment. Yun Jian's new cruise had just been established, and its reputation in Longmen City was not established yet. Some of the bosses had not even heard of New Cruise's name, let alone come here to look at and buy cars. Under such circumstances, Yun Jian planned to hold a large-scale auto show in Longmen City. As the name suggested, an auto show was to showcase cars to the public, while inviting reputable figures to watch the show to increase the company's reputation. Of course, there were monetary conditions to hold an auto show. Yun Jian did not have to worry about that. As for inviting reputable figures to watch the show, Yun Jian already had plans for that. As for the auto show, Yun Jian had moved it to a month later. Within this month, she had asked Zhang Jifan to arrange the car and get them to stay in it. At the same time, she had him prepare everything related to the auto show. As for other matters such as inviting reputable figures to the auto show, she would take care of them. Zhang Jifan was now obedient to Yun Jian in every way, so he nodded in agreement to Yun Jian's arrangements. When Yun Jian came home today, she realized that Qin Yiru was home early. Qin Yiru was smiling as she made dinner for Yun Jian and sat down with her. "Mom, what's wrong?" Yun Jian asked, curious. Qin Yiru was always the last to come home. Although Qin Yiru's job as a hotel attendant was quite relaxing, she came home late. Today, Qin Yiru came home early, so Yun Jian found it odd. "Xiao Jian, I found a better job. It's easy too. There's less work but the pay is high. It's 1,500 yuan a month." Back then, Qin Yiru's monthly income was only a few hundred yuan a month. She was over the moon. Seeing how happy Qin Yiru was, Yun Jian was happy as well. Yun Jian asked Qin Yiru, "Mom, what's the job?" I'm just a cleaner who cleans the floor, but the pay is high. It's not tiring. I just have to clean the entire place in the morning, afternoon, and night." Qin Yiru answered cheerfully. She then continued, "The place I'm working at is the newly established New Cruise in our city. It's a company that sells cars. The boss is doing really well with his business. I heard that he spent more than 10 million yuan to buy this shop." Chapter 228. When she heard from Qin Yiru that her mother was working at New Cruise, Yun Jian's eyelids twitched. Her mother's workplace had become her own company? Yun Jian was taken aback by this as well. It was a good thing though. At least Qin Yiru was working at her company. It would be convenient for her to give Qin Yiru subsidies in the future. It was legitimate. At the same time, Yun Jian was thinking if she should tell Zhang Jifan the next time she saw him to give the cleaning lady a raise. "Xiao Jian, are you listening to me?" Qin Yiru waved her hand a few times in front of Yun Jian when she saw that Yun Jian was distracted. "I'm listening, Mom." Yun Jian answered with a smile at Qin Yiru with squinted eyes. Qin Yiru nodded and continued with her thoughts. "Xiao Jian, I just think that we've been bothering your Auntie Dong for too long. I feel bad about it. I've saved some money these days and want to rent a place. Let's move out of here first. When I've saved enough money in the future, I'll come back and visit your Auntie Dong properly," Qin Yiru said. Yun Jian understood Qin Yiru right away. Qin Yiru thought that they had been bothering her for too long. It was someone else's house after all, so it was not appropriate. "Mom, I'm fine with it. I'll listen to you," Yun Jian said. She really was fine with it. To her, moving to another place was just a change of sleeping place. "Xiao Jian, you're not against it?" Qin Yiru was surprised. After all, moving out of the villa meant that their living environment would be much worse than it was now. Qin Yiru was thinking that if Yun Jian did not want to move to a worse environment, she would not move out first. After some time, when he had enough money on hand, he would rent a decent place to rent before moving out. I'll leave it to you," Yun Jian said with a nod. "Okay. Then tomorrow morning when your Auntie Dong is here, let's talk to her about it," Qin Yiru said. Qin Yiru was really grateful to Dong Ruan. When she was at her lowest, it was her old friend who took her family in. However, now that she had money on hand, she felt that she had disturbed him for too long and should move out. That was all. After all, everyone had a family. Although they were childhood best friends, they were now married. Although Dong Ruan's husband had passed away, she felt that it was inappropriate for her to disturb them for too long. The next day, Dong Ruan rested at home. When Qin Yiru mentioned this to Dong Ruan refused at first. But later, for some reason, he was convinced. At the same time, Dong Ruan also took a few days off to find the most comfortable rental apartment for Qin Yiru. Qin Yiru wanted to look for it herself, but she could not resist her best friend's enthusiasm in the end. Soon a rental apartment was found. Early in the morning, Qin Yiru brought Yun Jian to move out with bags of various sizes. Yun Jian did not have a lot of things. She only had a backpack, and there were not many things in it. "Xiao Jian, is everything ready?" Qin Yiru asked Yun Jian with bags of various sizes. Dong Ruan had also taken a day off to help Qin Yiru move things. She looked at Yun Jian as well. Everything's ready," Yun Jian answered with a nod. "Let's go then," Qin Yiru said and pushed the bags out the door. Screech! There was the sound of a car braking and the door was opened. Ce had just returned from the door when he saw Yun Jian and Qin Yiru walking out with bags of various sizes. He asked with a frown, "What are you guys doing?" "Ye's back? Auntie, I've been bothering you all these days. I'm moving out today. Come Xiaojian, say goodbye to Ai," Qin Yiru told Ce. She had been addressing Ce in an affectionate tone like an elder these days, and it was tacitly acknowledged. When Ce heard Qin Yiru's explanation, his brows furrowed, and he was already in front of Yun Jian, his tall frame looming over her. Chapter 229. Both Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan were flabbergasted by Ce's inexplicable action. Yun Jian, who stood in front of Ce, felt her eyelids twitch. Her heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Ah yeah, Auntie and Xiao Jian have already found a place outside. We're planning to move in today. Qin Yuru's voice softened as she faced the fuming Ce. Even Qin Yuru herself did not realize it. Why did she not think that Ce's action was odd? To Qin Yuru, she was also someone who had never been involved in love. Qin Yuru had never liked Yun Jian's biological father, Yun Gang. Back then, her family was not doing well, and wanted her to marry Yun Gang, so she did. Qin Yuru had never experienced the joy of love, so she found Ce's inexplicable action strange as well. Dong Wan, on the other hand, was different. She was stunned for a moment before she realized what was going on. Could her nephew have feelings for Yun Jian? Interested? Dong Wan knew that Ce was 19 years old, and no woman had ever been able to get close to him. No woman dared to even take a few steps closer to him, let alone get close to him. Ever since Ce's mother, who was also her biological sister, passed away, Dong Wan had been protective of Ce like a mother. It was because Ce was a child without a mother since he was young, so Dong Wan had to take care of him. What Dong Wan was most worried about was Ce's marriage in the future. Her nephew was proficient in everything, and his appearance was so handsome that it was indescribable. It was just that he had never been enlightened when it came to relationships. Therefore, Dong Ruan's heart skipped a beat when she saw the scene. Dong Ruan had her own selfish motives, but it was undeniable that she liked Yun Jian quite a bit. Now that she saw Ce's action, Dong Ruan helped Ce persuade Qin Yuru. Yuru, why are you insisting on moving out with your two children? Stay. Look, even my nephew can't bear for you guys to leave. As she spoke, Dong Ruan held Qin Yuru's hand and patted it. Her voice was soft and weary as she said, Yuru, stay here. Look at me. I'm living alone in this empty villa. It's so lonely. My lover left early, and I'm glad that you guys are here these few days. My son goes to school too. I used to face this lonely house after work, and it was so disappointing. So Yuru, stay here. Dong Ruan said it sincerely. After Dong Ruan's husband passed away in a car accident, she had been living alone with her son. Although they were well off, her son studied in a closed-off aristocratic school and rarely returned home. Now that she saw Qin Yuru's family moving in, she was genuinely happy. As for Ce, he did not stay for long at Dong Ruan's house. When Dong Ruan persuaded Qin Yuru to stay, Ce's grip on Yun Jian's hand tightened. She wanted to leave, but he would not let go. Yun Jian pursed her lips. She wanted to say something, but when the words reached her mouth, she could not say anything. Qin Yuru did not seem to notice Ce's grip on Yun Jian's hand. She was slow when it came to emotions. However, under Dong Ruan's repeated persuasion, Qin Yuru finally nodded with tears in her eyes. All right, we'll stay. Yun Jian's cheeks were already rosy. She struggled but could not break free. In the end, she could only give up. And Dong Ruan saw all of this. Chapter 230. The moment Ce heard Qin Yuru say that they would be staying, his handsome lips curled into a charming smile without anyone noticing. She was not leaving. Then, he would be able to see her for as long as he stayed here, excluding the few days when Yun Jian stayed in school. How nice. From then on, Ce would only go out to handle some necessary matters during the 5 days when Yun Jian stayed in school. On the weekends when Yun Jian came back from school, she would be able to see him every day. She was extremely surprised by this. Of course, this was all in the future. By the time Dong Ruan helped Qin Yuru move everything back to every corner of the villa, it was already 4:30 p.m. Dong Ruan glanced at Yun Jian and Ce before saying to Qin Yuru, Yuru, I don't have to go to work today. Since we're all here, I'll be the host tonight. Let's go to a restaurant together? Dong Ruan was afraid that Qin Yuru would reject her. She could not help but recall the scene back then. So she said to Qin Yuru, Yuru, do you remember when we snuck out of school to eat wontons when we didn't want to go to class in high school? As she spoke, Dong Ruan was really immersed in her memories. She smiled and said bitterly, that wonton shop is still open. Let's go there for dinner tonight. What do you think? Dong Ruan suggested going to a restaurant, because she wanted to buy more time for her nephew to spend with Yin Jian. However, as she spoke, Dong Wuan could not help but reminisce about the stupid things she and Qin Yiru did back then. The two of them even learned to play truant from school, just to eat a bowl of wontons. Qin Yiru had never approved of going to a restaurant. Perhaps it was because she had been through too much hardship that she could not change her habit. However, she more or less missed the place where she and Dong Wuan shared their memories. Okay. Qin Yiru agreed to it at once. The memories from the past were unforgettable. Now they had grown up, gotten married, and had children. However, the scenery of the past was blurred in his mind. Some things can change at will. For example, Dong Ruan's husband's accident, or Qin Yiru's marriage to Yun Gang was so heartless. But the only thing that made people nostalgic was memories. Alright, then let's go over now, Dong Ruan said with a smile. In fact, there were only 4 people in this group. Dong Ruan's son was studying in an elite school, while Yun Jian's brother, Yun Yi, was studying in the school. After all, it was a key high school, and there was a lot of work to be done, so he rarely had time to rest. Dong Ruan's car was a black Audi sports car, which could only seat 2 people, including Qin Yiru, Yun Jian Ce, and Dong Ruan herself. There were a total of 4 people. This meant that they had to drive 2 cars, and 2 people in 1 car. Yiru, sit in my car. Let's talk about the past. How much I miss those days, Dong Ruan said as she pulled Qin Yiru's hand and walked to her Audi sports car. At the same time, she did not forget to reassure Qin Yiru, and not to worry about Yun Jian. Ai has a driver's license. He'll drive your Xiaojian. The 2 young people will have something to talk about when they're together. Yun Jian, who stood at the back, was dumbfounded. She was speechless. After Dong Wuan drove away with Qin Yiru, Ce came over. His handsome eyes and lips curled as he told her softly, "Let's go." Chapter 231. Dong Wuan started the engine and drove off in the Audi without waiting for Yun Jian and Ce. By the time Yun Jian got into Ce's Lamborghini, Dong Wuan had already driven a long distance away. Yun Jian instantly felt as though she had been tricked into boarding a pirate ship. However, this wasn't the first time she had been in Ce's car. This time, however, she felt a little strange. When she turned her head and saw Ce's handsome face, she had the urge to blush. Fortunately, nothing happened along the way. Dong Wuan gave her location to Ce, so Ce quickly found the wonton shop they were at. This was an extremely old wonton shop. The decorations in the shop were from more than 10 or 20 years ago, which was already outdated for the current era. However, the shop's business had always been good, so the shop had been open until now and hadn't closed down. Many of the old shops in the surrounding area had already closed down or been sold, so this wonton shop was the only one that was still open. Above the door of the wonton shop, there were a few words written in block letters: Sue's Little Wonton. The owner of this wonton shop was an old lady in her 50s or 60s with the surname Sue. This shop was run by Old Lady Sue and her husband, but Old Lady Sue's husband had passed away a few years ago. When Ce stopped the car and walked into the shop with Yun Jian, Qin Yiru and Dong Wuan were catching up with Old Lady Sue. In fact, Old Lady Sue knew Qin Yiru and Dong Wuan. When they were young, they loved to come to Old Lady Sue's wonton shop the most. At that time, Old Lady Sue was only Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan's age. Back then, Dong Wuan and Qin Yiru had played truant from school and realized that they had only brought enough money for a bowl of wonton. Later, Old Lady Sue asked her husband to make an extra bowl of wonton for them as a free gift. Dong Wuan and Qin Yiru had always remembered this incident and would never forget it. When they were seated, Dong Wuan deliberately pulled Qin Yiru to sit with her, forcing Yun Jian to sit with Ce. Yun Jian pursed her lips. Ce understood what his aunt meant, and a rare smile appeared on his handsome face. "Here for bowls of wonton. They're fresh out of the pot, and the stuffing is all made this morning. Come and have a taste. Let's see if it tastes the same as it did 10 years ago." Old Madame Sue appeared to be full of vigor. She placed bowls of wonton in front of the 4 people. Yun Jian picked up a spoon and blew on the wonton gently before swallowing it down with some soup. The smell was very fragrant and delicious. She narrowed her eyes In her previous life, she had traveled all over the world and eaten countless delicacies. However, this was the first time she had eaten such a delicious wonton that was bland, yet had a hint of natural flavor. This was even more delicious than those delicacies. Delicious. It tastes just as good as it did in the past. Qin Yiru and Dong Wuan couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as they tasted the wonton delicately. Eat more if it's delicious. Old Madame Su covered her mouth and laughed. She had always held on to this wonton shop. After her husband's death, it became her only tie. This place was the place where she and her husband reminisced. As old Madame Su reminisced with Qin Yiru and Dong Wuan, she couldn't help but steal a few glances at Yun Jian and Ce. In the end, old Madame Su sighed and said, "These two children are so handsome. I think they look like husband and wife. These two children have a bright future ahead of them." This empty praise made Yun Jian choke on her wonton. She coughed a few times. "Are you okay?" Ce threw away the spoon in his hand and gently patted Yun Jian's back. Chapter 232. Old Madame Su chuckled and looked at Ce like she had been there before, mumbling to herself, "Hey Ce, you're right. It's great to be young." Yun Jian choked harder at that. Ce pushed the stool away and stood up with his tall and muscular frame to go behind Yun Jian to pat her back. "Where do you feel uncomfortable? Eat slowly. Don't choke." Ce's gentle tone surprised Dong Wuan, who was his aunt. Her nephew had always prided himself as cold and aloof, usually not interested in women. But now, Dong Wuan could not help gulping as she thought about it. He was really interested this time. She wanted to give herself a thumbs up. It seemed like she was right to matchmake Yun Jian and her nephew. No matter how clueless Qin Yiru was about love, she should have noticed it by now. In spite of it, Qin Yiru was concerned about Yun Jian and did not notice anything else. She stood up quickly and asked Yun Jian frantically, "Xiao Jian, how are you? You didn't choke, did you? Don't rush to eat the wontons. Slow down. Eat slowly." As she spoke, Qin Yiru wanted to help Ce pat Yun Jian's back. "Yiru's fine. It's normal for her to choke. Let my ai do it. He's good at this. Let him pat her, and she'll be done in no time." Dong Wuan pulled Qin Yiru and stood aside with a chuckle, covering her mouth. Qin Yiru, on the other hand, was completely relieved, thinking that Ce had learned some sort of massage. Yun Jian recovered quickly, her cheeks flushed. Ce's hand had slid up and down her back just now. She could even feel his hand touching her skin and brushing past the strap of her bra. The part of her body that had never been touched before was tingling. Yun Jian waved her hands quickly. "I'm fine. I just choked accidentally. I'm fine now." Ce wore a charming smile. Old Madame Su was full of praise when she saw it. She was probably talking about Yun Jian and Ce together. Qin Yiru was amused by her words. In spite of it, Qin Yiru did not think otherwise. To her, Ce was excellent, be it his family background, character or looks. Her Xiao Jian was excellent in her heart too, but her family background was not good enough for someone like Ce. Otherwise, Qin Yiru would be more than willing to treat Ce as her son-in-law. Yun Jian was still young, but from Qin Yiru's point of view, 15 years old was the age to talk about marriage in a few years in the countryside. After they were done with the wontons, Dong Wuan dragged Qin Yiru to walk around the street they used to frequent when they were younger. Without a doubt, Dong Wuan had created an atmosphere for Ce to be alone with Yun Jian again. No matter how dumb Yun Jian was, she could tell what Dong Wuan meant. She blushed but did not reject Ce's goodwill. She could feel that she was getting along with him, and she did not dislike it. However, she did not know how to feel more deeply about it. Yun Jian and Ce walked along a bustling street. Both of them were walking side by side. On the other hand, Ce, who stood beside Yun Jian, had his hands in his pockets with a smirk, looking happy. Both of them walked around aimlessly. The street was downtown, so there were many people coming and going. Suddenly, a lively figure flashed past Yun Jian's eyes. She was stunned when she saw who it was. The other party was taken aback as well. "Wow! My Yun Jian, what a coincidence to run into you here." The person was none other than Chu Ning. Chu Ning was a year older than Yun Jian, and was currently in her first year of high school. Chapter 233. What a coincidence! Yunjian said to Chu Ning with a squint. She did not dislike Chu Ning. In fact, she quite liked the girl's personality. Chu Ning had a lively personality and was usually carefree. Sometimes, she even gave people the impression that she was careless. However, when it came to serious matters, she would definitely rein in her unruly personality. After spending some time together, Chu Ning had changed from calling Yunjian's name directly to calling her Yunjian or Yunjian intimately. However, it was undeniable that the addition of the word son did indeed make people feel that the relationship between the two of them was much more intimate. Wow! Chu Ning, is this handsome guy your friend too? While Yunjian and Chu Ning were greeting each other, a girl who came with Chu Ning led the group of people closer to them. The girl stared at Ce in a daze, looking like she was smitten. No, he's from Yunjian's family. Chu Ning glared at the girl, seemingly unfriendly toward her. The girl was actually Chu Ning's buddy's girlfriend, Xiao Gizi. Chu Ning was quite manly to begin with. Even though she was a girl and looked sweet and lovely on the outside, she was still rather manly. However, Chu Ning had played with a bunch of boys since she was young and addressed them as her buddies. This group of buddies didn't treat her as a girl either. They usually played together and were very happy. Chu Ning was also a carefree person. Even though she was a girl, she was the most skilled in martial arts among her group of buddies. That was why Chu Ning caught Gu Yunjian's attention and was selected to be a candidate for the Advanced Special Forces. Today, Chu Ning was out on the streets with a group of her close friends. As for the other girls present, they were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's buddies. Xiao Gizi was Chu Ning's best buddy's girlfriend. Seeing Xiao Gizi asking about the handsome Ce in front of her buddies, Chu Ning was naturally upset. She felt indignant for her buddy. How could he find such a flirtatious girlfriend? That was why she didn't treat Xiao Gizi nicely. Therefore, when Chu Ning said that Ce belonged to Yunjian's family, it was a warning to Xiao Gizi that Ce belonged to her friend, and that he was already taken. Oh, Xiao Gizi agreed and stood to the side, but her eyes were still fixed on Ce. Initially, she thought that her current boyfriend was handsome. However, she regretted it when she saw Ce. It turned out that a truly handsome man was not like her current boyfriend. Xiao Gizi's boyfriend, who was also Chu Ning's best friend, was called Meng Xiao. Meng Xiao didn't notice that his girlfriend, Xiao Gizi, was acting differently at this time. On the contrary, Meng Xiao was an enthusiastic person. He invited Yunjian and Ce enthusiastically. Since everyone knows each other, why don't we walk together? We're on the same side anyway. Once Meng Xiao said that, Chu Ning nodded vigorously and told Yunjian, "Yeah, Yunjian, or let's walk together, okay?" Chu Ning even stuck her tongue out and winked at Yunjian. Yunjian nodded under Chu Ning's hopeful gaze and smiled before turning to Ce. "Why don't you go back first? I'll go out for a walk." Old Madame Sue's words kept replaying in her mind the entire way. Her cheeks were flushed pink, making her look irresistible. This caused her to blush whenever she saw Ce, so she wanted him to go back first. Chapter 234. Hee, since you're Xiaoning's friend, you're my friend too. Just bring your boyfriend along. You don't have to be shy. Meng Xiao looked at Yunjian and said to Yunjian with a knowing look. This was because Chu Ning had told Xiao Gizi that Ce belonged to Yunjian's family. This sentence made Meng Xiao immediately think that Yunjian and Ce were a couple. After hearing Meng Xiao's words, Yunjian's rosy cheeks became even redder. However, her facial expression did not change much. "He's not my boyfriend," Yunjian clarified. Ce's smile relaxed a little, but he was not angry. Instead, he looked at everyone with his handsome side profile. He continued Yunjian's words. "Indeed, he's not now, but he'll be soon." Ce's words were very straightforward. It was hard to imagine that someone like him would say such ambiguous words. However, when these words came out of Ce's mouth, it was as simple as asking, "Have you eaten today?" Yunjian's eyelids twitched violently. She did not expect Ce to really say it out loud. Previously, She had seen Ci's actions towards her, but he had never said anything about it. His words just now really gave her a shock. Yunjian did not know that Ce had never been in contact with women. Ever since he was young, he had always hated women. Once he fell in love, it would never change for the rest of his life. Moreover, once he found out about his feelings, he would definitely not hide. It was precisely because of this that Ce dared to say it out loud and do it in front of everyone. Chu Ning took a deep breath and was the first to step forward to ease the awkward atmosphere. Alright, let's hurry and go. Before the sun sets, let's take a walk around. Saying that, Chu Ning put an arm around Yunjian's shoulder and led the way. At this moment, Xiao Gizi, who was walking at the back, took a few glances at the tall and handsome Ce who was walking beside Yunjian, then at her boyfriend Meng Xiao. She suddenly felt that Meng Xiao was even less outstanding. Why? Xiao Gizi dug her fingernails into the flesh of her palms. Why can't I be the first person to meet such a handsome man? In 2 days' time for Yunjian and the rest to go on a mission, Good Junjian had specifically instructed that they were not allowed to touch many things when they went on a mission 2 days later. Therefore, Chu Ning dragged Yunjian around as a way to have some fun before they went on a mission. At this moment, the sky was already dark and the neon lights on the streets were lit up. It's getting dark, and it's quite boring to walk around here. I have a good idea. There's going to be a motorcycle race on the mountain road today. There are some big shots that we don't usually see. I heard that there are a few international motorcycle racers. Do you want to go and take a look? After strolling around the streets, they didn't see anything new. Just as everyone was about to say goodbye and go home, a boy with a righteous face stood up and boasted. Are you serious? Is this news accurate? Immediately, another guy chimed in. In fact, other than Chu Ning, the other girls were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's friends. In front of their girlfriends, this group of guys naturally wanted to show their most heroic and knowledgeable side. Chapter 235. I won't be going, Yunjian told Chu Ning with a smile. Come on, Yunjian, let's go and have some fun. Chu Ning tugged at the corner of her shirt and winked at Yunjian, whispering to Yunjian, we'll be going on a mission in 2 days. Let's use this time to go and have some fun. Yunjian glanced at Ce beside her before nodding at Chu Ning. She did not want to continue shopping, but once she thought of walking alone with Ce after parting ways with Chu Ning and the rest, her heart skipped a beat. At the same time, she felt bitter. Hence, she agreed to go with Chu Ning and the rest. As for Ce, he had no objections. His twinkling eyes were trained on Yunjian, his handsome face drawing attention. It was undeniable that there were plenty of eyes on Ce along the way. Let's go then. Chu Ning held Yunjian's hand like they were close friends and strutted ahead. Mountain Winding Road was situated on a mountain not far away. As the name suggested, the mountain was called Mountain Winding, and the road was called Mountain Winding Road for short. At the same time, this road was built halfway up Pan Mountain. Some of Longmen City's rich kids, noble families, and big bosses liked to play exciting games, like racing, motorcycle racing, and so on. Usually, these exciting games were played on this road in Pan Shan. Hence, there was another name for the road, Life and Death Road. Yunjian and the rest walked there. The night breeze was chilly. Ce stood beside Yunjian to block the wind for her. It wasn't a long walk from the shopping area to the winding mountain road. By the time Yunjian and the rest arrived at Mountain Winding Road, some of the spectators were already cheering noisily. Look over there. The righteous guy who suggested for them to watch the motorcycle race shouted excitedly. His name was Citadun. Hearing Citadun's shout, everyone's gaze shifted to the scene. They saw a man in his mid-20s, waving at the crowd with a helmet in his hand. He's the international motorcycle racer, Lin Wei. Lin Wei is the pride of Country Z. He's only 25 this year, but he's already the captain of an international motorcycle racing team. Not only is he good at motorcycle racing, he's a top racer too. Citadun pointed at the man who was the center of attention and introduced him to Yunjian and the rest excitedly. Citadun's words were tinged with pride as he spoke. The way he boasted made it seem as if Lin Wei was himself. It sounds amazing. A girl couldn't help but look over there with admiration when she heard it. When Citadun heard this, he immediately felt proud of himself. The reason he suggested for everyone to come here was to show off that he was knowledgeable. A guy like Citadun did not have any other specialties. His only hobby was to study these things. At this moment, Citadun raised his head like a little swan. Especially in front of Ce, he wanted to show that he was more outstanding. In fact, Citadun had always disliked Ce ever since he came out. He was not like Meng Xiao, that fool, who would really welcome Ce. Ce was more outstanding than all of them combined. When he came, all the girls' attention was on him. Citadun could not wait to show his best side. He wanted to be better than Ce. Citadun did not notice that Yunjian was squinting her eyes at Lin Wei, who was the center of attention. She was wondering why Lin Wei looked so familiar. Wasn't Lin Wei ranked 4th on the assassin ranking? Lin Wei was also an assassin from the Inhun organization. Chapter 236. She turned her head and saw Ce pursing his lips slightly. He felt Yunjian's gaze and turned to face her. His gentle voice made Yunjian's heart skip a beat. What's wrong? His magnetic and mellow voice was pleasant to the ears. Nothing. Yunjian was like a student who was caught red-handed by the teacher. She turned her head and faced Ce from the side. Her cheeks flushed red in the next moment. She already knew that Ce was the leader of an Hun organization. That meant that Lin Wei was undoubtedly his subordinate. Yunjian knew Lin Wei as well. The reason why she could recognize Lin Wei at first glance was that when she was slaying God in her past life, Lin Wei was her superior who trained her in an Hun organization. Lin Wei was decisive and ruthless when it came to killing. In her previous life, it was under Lin Wei's training that she developed her abilities. Perhaps others did not know that Lin Wei was just an ordinary person on the surface. He was an international motorcycle racer. However, he was secretly the 4th assassin on the international assassin chart. Perhaps others did not know, but Yunjian knew very well. There were 4 leaders in an Hun organization. The 4 of them were Shueying, Adam, and Mo Senator, and the last person of the 4 was Lin Wei. Lin Wei was also one of the 4 leaders in an Hun organization. At the same time, Lin Wei was the most mysterious of the 4 leaders. Even Yunjian had to investigate for a long time before she found out that Lin Wei was one of the 4 leaders in an Hun organization. Yunjian could not deny that Lin Wei was only ranked 4th on the assassin chart. She was personally trained by Lin Wei. Although she had surpassed Lin Wei in her previous life, she knew Lin Wei's abilities well. This seemingly harmless man was actually ranked 2nd on the assassin chart. At this moment, she finally understood that Lin Wei was Ce's subordinate. It's starting, the motorcycle race is starting. Citadun suddenly pointed at the set excitedly. He interrupted everyone's thoughts and made everyone look at the set. Yunjian also looked over, only to see that the burly and strong Lin Wei had already put on his helmet and sat on his motorcycle with one foot on the ground. With the referee's gunshot, the motorcycle rushed out like an arrow. The atmosphere at the scene reached its climax. Citadun followed the crowd and shouted, "Lin Wei, come on! Lin Wei will win!" His voice was so loud as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was Lin Wei's fan. The result was naturally indisputable, and Lin Wei won. Yunjian was not surprised at all by this result. After all, she was taught by Lin Wei, so she naturally knew what Lin Wei was capable of. A long time after Lin Wei reached the finish line, the motorcyclists finally caught up and reached the finish line one after another. "Ah, my motorcycle is out of control. Help!" At this moment, a black motorcycle rushed out from the circular road and rushed into the boiling crowd. For a moment, the crowd screamed and couldn't dodge in time. Some were even knocked to the side and were sent flying. The motorcycle continued to move forward and finally rushed straight towards the crowd where Yunjian and the others were. Xiao Gizi was so scared that her face turned pale, and she was the first to scream. Chu Ning's face also turned pale. Although she had been practicing her skills, the motorcycle was very fast, and with the added wind, it was very strong. She didn't have the strength to resist at all. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Just as she was about to make a move, a tall figure flashed past her. By the time everyone turned around, the motorcycle had already been kicked to the ground by the tall figure who had flashed out. All the resistance and inertia of the motorcycle suddenly stopped. When the crowd came to their senses, they were extremely shocked. It was Ce. Yunjian was taken aback as well. She knew that Ce was good, but she didn't expect him to be so fast. Chapter 237. Hiss! Everyone at the scene sucked in a breath of air. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in fear and shock. Ce put his hands back into his pockets, after kicking down the motorcycle that had gone out of control. He walked back to Yunjian's side as if nothing had happened. Only the motorcycle that was still spinning on the spot, and the driver's cries for help announced that everything that had just happened was real. Situdun was the most frightened person at this moment. Situdun didn't like Ce. He thought that Ce was just a pretty boy. He didn't expect him to be so powerful. Situdun was not only shocked by this. Lin Wei turned his head when he heard the commotion. He was stunned when he saw Ce. Lin Wei strode over to Ce as fast as he could. He lowered his head respectfully and said to Ce, "Young master." An international motorcycle racer bowed his head to Ce. What did this mean? Everyone's eyelids twitched violently at this moment. Especially Situdun. One had to know that Situdun had bragged in front of everyone just now, because he seemed to know something about Lin Wei. Now, Lin Wei had run over to Ce respectfully. Whenever Situdun recalled what he had done, he felt as if he had shot himself in the foot with a brick. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Yes. Ce nodded gently at Lin Wei. He glanced at the motorcycle that had gone out of control, and said to Lin Wei, "You know how to deal with this?" "Yes," Lin Wei replied. Yunjian's eyelashes fluttered. Her sharp eyes were also looking at the motorcycle. She also saw the difference. This motorcycle was obviously tampered with. Otherwise, why would it go out of control? Even if it had gone out of control, why would it crash into them alone when there were so many people here? There could not be so many coincidences in the world. It was obvious that someone had done something, and their target was Ce. "Let's go." Yunjian was still looking at the motorcycle when Ce suddenly turned around and grabbed her hand. His deep eyes stared at Yunjian as he held her hand and walked back the way they came. "Yunjian, are you leaving?" Chu Ning saw that Yunjian was about to leave and immediately called out to her. She was a little afraid of Ce now, so she spoke hesitantly. "She's leaving." Before Yunjian could reply to Chu Ning, Ce dragged her away. "Then I'll see you 2 days later." Chu Ning swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The thought of Ce's ferocious glare made her a little scared, but she still greeted Yunjian. "Okay." Yunjian nodded as she was dragged away by Ce. On the way down the mountain, it was dark all around, and there were no street lights. "Did someone try to assassinate you just now?" Yunjian asked. She already knew that someone had tried to assassinate him. "Yeah," Ce said with a nasal voice. Just as Ce finished speaking, his deep and sharp eyes flashed. Yunjian also realized that something was wrong. Someone was coming. Just as Yunjian narrowed her eyes and was about to make a move, Ce wrapped his arm around her waist and rolled her into a thick bush at the foot of the mountain at lightning speed. Yunjian felt dizzy. Then, she saw Ce's enlarged handsome face above her. If there was anyone here, they would definitely be able to see the two of them hiding amidst the thick and tall grass in an ambiguous position. Yunjian was about to push Ce away when she heard a flurry of footsteps. She immediately stopped moving. Someone was coming. Of course, it was the group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce. If it weren't for Yunjian and Ce's sensitive ears, they wouldn't have been able to hear the sound. Ce was on top of Yunjian. His breathing gradually quickened. The milky scent of a young girl wafted into his nose. Yunjian's rosy lips were right in front of him. It was as tempting as a delicious pastry. At this moment, the footsteps were getting closer. Chapter 238. Yunjian's soft lips were kissed all of a sudden. Her eyes widened as she stared at Ce's enlarged face. Shock. Surprise. Horror. She had lived for 16 to 17 years in her previous life and this life, but she had never been so intimate with a man. Not to mention kissing, she had never even held a man's hand. She had never even held his hand. CE had actually kissed her. Furthermore, the group of people who wanted to assassinate CE were still nearby. Of course, it was because the group of people who wanted to assassinate CE was still nearby that Yunjian didn't make a sound. Otherwise, she would have pushed CE away immediately. The price she had to pay for not making a sound was CE's crazy kisses. CE had never kissed a woman before. This was his first time kissing a woman, and it was also the first time he had the urge to lock the young lady in front of him tightly under his body. The group of people who wanted to assassinate CE came closer and closer, but Yunjian didn't move at all. CE controlled his strength. He kissed Yunjian's lips gently, but didn't make a sound that the group of people could hear. Yunjian's cheeks flushed red. She was holding back her breath from CE's kiss. But that wasn't the worst part. Yunjian suddenly felt a warmth in her chest. He even put his hand on her chest. He even pinched it. Yunjian's beautiful eyes widened, and she reached out to push CE away. CE was caught off guard, and was pushed away by Yunjian. At this moment, the group of people who wanted to assassinate CE had already left. In her previous life, Yunjian was a secret agent, so she had naturally learned how to seduce people. Some secret agents would even use their bodies to seduce men, and only kill them at the last moment. Of course, Yunjian had never tried this before. Ever since she had debuted, no one was her match. In other words, she was so powerful that she didn't need to resort to such despicable tricks. It was precisely because she had learned this that Yunjian understood that those female agents used the moment when a man was at his lowest to kill him. It was obvious that CE had really fallen for him, which was why he was pushed away by Yunjian. Yunjian wiped her red lips, stood up and walked forward. Seeing that Yunjian was angry, CE quickly grabbed Yunjian's wrist and explained, "I didn't do it on purpose." He really didn't do it on purpose. Cough. Touch her breasts. It was just that she was too alluring, and he couldn't control himself. Go away. Yunjian glared at CE, and flung her hands a few times only to realize that she could not shake off his grip. Yunjian's heart pounded even more violently. It was as if her heart would leap out of her body in the next second. She wanted to cover her heartbeat, but she could only feel it beating rapidly. I didn't do it on purpose. CE repeated this sentence again. His beautiful eyes had a glimmer of light. He was supposed to be extremely arrogant, but he was willing to lower himself for her sake. His tone even sounded like he was begging for forgiveness. Yunjian pursed her lips. She suddenly recalled the moment when his lips were on hers. Suddenly, she felt her cheeks burning up. I'm going back. Yunjian didn't want to argue with him anymore. Okay. CE revealed a handsome smile. Then he looked at her with a gentle gaze. He held Yunjian's hand and walked down the mountain. Yunjian didn't resist. This was the first time she felt powerless. Her resistance was nothing in front of CE. She was the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, the strongest boss of the Kosha mercenaries. Chapter 239. By the time Yunjian and CE returned to the villa, Dong Ruan and Qin Yiru had already gone home. Dong Ruan and Qin Yiru were currently sitting in the living room, facing a television, as they enjoyed snacks while watching a drama. Dong Ruan came from a wealthy family, so it was not surprising that she could afford a television in this era. Qin Yiru, on the other hand, was obviously planning to relax for the day as she and Dong Ruan watched the drama on the television together in a lively atmosphere. Qin Yiru did not notice anything when she saw Yunjian and CE coming back from the front door. She merely asked, Xiao Jianei, you're back. Do you want to come and watch some TV together? Dong Ruan saw Yunjian and CE coming in one after another, and Yunjian's cheeks blushing for some reason. She knew that her nephew must have done something terrible. In spite of it, Dong Ruan pretended that she did not see anything and greeted Yunjian and CE like how Qin Yiru did. Mom, I'm tired from shopping today. I'll go to bed first, Yunjian said. Okay, Xiao Jian, go upstairs and rest if you're tired. Chingyuru said. Yunjian nodded and went upstairs. Auntie, I'll go back to my room too. Ce went upstairs with Yunjian with a dark expression. The kids aren't feeling well, are they? Chingyuru watched Ce go upstairs worriedly and wanted to stand up to ask about it. I already said that they are still children. We adults should mind our own business. Besides, they're all grown up, they should know better. Of course, they'll tell us if they're feeling unwell. Dongwon stopped Chingyuru and said with a smile. Chingyuru was relieved to hear that and calmed down to continue watching the television. Second floor. As soon as Yunjian went upstairs, Ce followed closely behind. However, he didn't do anything to her. Instead, he looked at her petite back and said, "Good night." When Yunjian heard Ce's voice, she was stunned for a moment before she strode back to her room. 2 days later, because it was school day, classes were still going on as usual. Gujunjian had already applied for leave for Yunjian in advance. Ce was not in Longmen City these days. After all, as the leader of Anhun, he naturally had many things to do. It was just that in order to spend more time with Yunjian, Ce had put aside his work to come stay in Longmen City during the weekends when Yunjian was not staying in the dormitory. By the time they arrived at the military training camp, the other 6 had already arrived. Yunjian returned to the team. After the 7 of them reported their numbers, Gujunjian told them in a serious tone, "I've said before that the mission this time is very difficult, but I believe that you can complete it successfully. Now, each of you go to the armory and pick a weapon that suits you and gather here. Remember, you can only pick one weapon." Gujunjian stood where he was with his hands behind his back after he finished speaking. The 7 of them went to the armory at once. The armory here was actually a place to store hidden weapons. The weapons room here was equipped with all kinds of weapons. Once they entered the armory, Chu Xiongnan could not help exclaiming, "Wow, wow, wow, there are so many weapons. So cool. Hurry up and pick a weapon that suits you and gather outside." Lu Shiyan was much calmer as he picked up a pistol and walked out. "Yunjian, what weapon do you plan to pick?" Chu Ning looked at the weapons excitedly and asked Yunjian hesitantly. "This." Yunjian turned her hand and smirked, her chosen weapon already in her palm. It was a butterfly knife. Chapter 240. She's indeed an ignorant fool. This kind of weapon can be bought anywhere. What's the use of it? Jiang Weiwei was very upset that Yunjian had taken the first place in the cross-country race. She could not help but laugh when she saw that Yunjian was only holding a butterfly knife. "What does it have to do with you what kind of weapon my Yunjian is using? Jiang Weiwei, you should mind your own business." Chu Ning was the first to speak up for Yunjian when she heard that. Jiang Weiwei's eyes turned fierce. She had looked down on them from the beginning, especially the newcomer Yunjian. However, this newcomer whom she looked down on actually surpassed her in the cross-country race last time. But so what? She was good at running, but that did not mean that she was good at everything else. Moreover, Jiang Weiwei was born into a military family. She had been training since she was young. Perhaps she had lost to Yunjian in running. However, that was not necessarily the case in other aspects. It was undeniable that Jiang Weiwei was a competitive person. Chu Ning and Jiang Weiwei looked at each other and did not say anything else. Both of them ignored each other. Yunjian did not hold it against Jiang Weiwei either. Soon, the group of people chose their weapons and left the armory. Of course, other than Yunjian, the rest of them chose firearms and other weapons. Most of them chose handguns. Gujunjian stood outside and watched as the few of them returned to the team after choosing their weapons. He glanced at the weapons in their hands and paused when he saw the butterfly knife in Yunjian's hand. Other than Yunjian, the rest of them chose handguns or other weapons with high damage. Yunjian was the only one who could wield a weapon like the butterfly knife that required one's ability to wield it. Reporting, we have chosen our weapons. As the team leader, Lu Shiyan did a head count and reported to Gujunjian. Okay. Gujunjian nodded. Then, he began to announce the mission Yunjian and the rest were about to carry out. Your mission location is in Country X's H province. There are 2 underworld forces in Country X. and they will soon conduct an arms trade. And your goal this time is to seize the arms. Remember, even if you can't take the firearms away, you have to make sure they don't complete the deal. As for the time and place where these two forces traded arms, we only have a rough idea. You'll have to go to Country X and investigate it in detail. Later, I will send a car to send you to Country X's H province. Remember, during the mission, you can only use code names. At this point, Gu Yunjian's tone was absolutely solemn. Also, Country X is an economically backward country. In Country X, the security is not as good as in Country Z. Especially for the underground forces, murder and arson are common. So be careful. Under the tense and solemn atmosphere of Gu Junjian, everyone felt their hearts tighten. Yes, the group of people responded. Then get ready to set off immediately, Gu Junjian said. Country X was actually quite far from Country Z, but it was not separated by the sea. Therefore, as long as they passed the border, they could reach there by car. Gu Junjian sent someone to send them to Country X. The car drove for about a day and a night before they arrived. The person who sent Yunjian, and the rest overtook Yunjian, and the rest to H province and left. Lu Shiyin and the rest took some Country X currency that Gu Junjian gave them. And they quickly checked into a hotel. Country X's economic development was very backward, and this could be seen from the structure of the houses. Chapter 241. It was nighttime, and the sky was completely dark. Yunjian's group of 7 sat around a round low table that was so old that it looked like it would fall with a push. Captain Lu Shiyin was holding a few sets of information. He distributed them to everyone and scanned them. This set of information is the scope of our target this time, Lu Shiyin said. The rest of them immediately took the information and scanned through it. Yunjian only took a few glances at the piece of paper. These two underworld forces were the overlords of Country X. This time, the arms trade between the two forces could be considered an especially important matter in Country X. These two underworld forces were called the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang. These two gangs were one gang. Country X did not have a large population, but these two gangs had about 1,000 people. As for the time and location of the other arms deals, even Gu Junjian had no way of finding out. If they wanted to disrupt the arms deal between these two gangs, they had to know the time and location of the deal. If they wanted to know the time and location of the deal, Yunjian's group of 7 had to investigate it themselves. Therefore, this mission was not suitable for the advanced special forces soldiers who often showed up. That was why Gu Junjian had said that they could not let the enemy suspect them at all during this period of time. If they wanted to understand this, they had to infiltrate the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang to investigate the situation. If they were caught and their identities were exposed, then the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang would be able to wantonly kill people in Country X. They would not be able to leave Country X alive. This was a matter of life and death, so it was not a small matter. Captain Lu Shiyin frowned and pondered for a long time before he suggested, since we don't know the exact time and location of the arms deal between the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang, we have to find out in the shortest time possible. Captain, I suggest we go to the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang tonight to find out more, Fang Shaoran suggested. I think so too. Lu Shiyin nodded at Fang Shaoran, then he pondered. Then who should we send? Naturally Azura and I will go. Both of us are the fastest runners. Even if we are detected by the enemy, we can retreat in time. Jiang Weiwei glanced at Yin Jian. She had already started using code names to address each other. Not only was Jiang Weiwei displeased with Yin Jian, but she was also displeased with everyone else present other than herself. But it was one thing to be unhappy with someone. She would also play some tricks on the person she was unhappy with. If there was one thing about Jiang Weiwei that people did not dislike, it would probably be that when it came to a critical moment, no matter how unhappy she was with someone, she would put away her feelings and complete the mission together with them first before taking revenge for her personal grudge. Lu Shiyin was silent for a while before nodding. Okay, Then Lu Shiyin turned to look at Yun Jian. You don't have any objections, right? I have no objections. Yun Jian grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth, and agreed. Now, Yun Jian asked Lu Shiyin. That's right. You guys get ready. Lu Shiyin stood up. His handsome face revealed a trace of seriousness. I don't need to prepare. Yun Jian smiled. She walked to her backpack, unzipped it, and took out a black bandage. Then she deftly placed the only weapon she had, the butterfly knife, on her waist and tied it tightly with the black bandage. After doing this, she lifted the corner of her shirt and stood up. She could hide a weapon like this? Everyone was stunned and dumbfounded, especially Jiang Weiwei. She was still holding the shiny pistol in her hand, and was still deciding if she should bring it out with her. The pistol was big and difficult to hide. Even if it was hidden on the body, it would be easily discovered. The butterfly knife, however, was different. If she tied it to her waist like how she was doing, unless someone lifted the corner of her shirt, no one would realize that she was hiding a knife at her waist. Chapter 242. Jiang Weiwei was the most embarrassed person in the group. She had previously mocked Yun Jian for choosing the butterfly knife as a weapon. But now that she thought about it, wasn't she the laughable one? Jiang Weiwei paused for a moment before tossing the pistol in her hand onto the table. Then, she took out a small Swiss Army knife from her backpack and stuffed it into her pocket. Pistols were very conspicuous. Naturally, they couldn't carry pistols, but they could carry knives. Moreover, they were only going to check out the situation tonight, not start the operation. Let's go. Yun Jian's eyes moved. She swayed her long hair that was tied up tightly and led the way out. Naturally, she was talking to Jiang Weiwei. Perhaps Yun Jian didn't really appreciate Jiang Weiwei, but since it was a mission, as long as Jiang Weiwei didn't do anything excessive, she wouldn't mind. Jiang Weiwei didn't respond to Yun Jian's words, but she followed her out. After Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei left the room, Lu Shiyin and the others didn't stay idle. We'll split into groups and ask the residents about the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang. We'll gather back here in an hour. Lu Shiyin said to the other members. Thus, the group of people quickly dispersed. Some people in Country X's H province also spoke Mandarin. Only a small number of people were influenced by other languages. Therefore, there was no language barrier. Yun Jian's figure dashed through the night. Her long hair fluttered as she ran in the dark night sky, drawing a beautiful arc. Behind her, Jiang Weiwei ran with all her might and barely caught up to her. One had to admit that Jiang Weiwei was pretty good. If it was someone else, they would have been left behind by Yun Jian. In that document, the locations of the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang were also listed. However, there was no more detailed information. It was up to them to investigate all of this. Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei decided to check out the Flying Sky Gang. This was because the Flying Sky Gang was more powerful than the Iron Lock Gang. The Flying Sky Gang's base was on the busiest street in H province. In Country X, a province was about the size of a city in Country Z. There was a 5-story modern building at the end of the street. It was the most outstanding building in the circle of dilapidated houses. This was the headquarters of the Flying Heavens Gang. At the entrance of the building, there were 2 men guarding the door. One of the 2 gatekeepers was tall, and the other was short. At this moment, they were watching the crowd at the entrance. This building was the headquarters of the Flying Sky Gang. At the same time, as long as one entered the building, they would see that the lobby on the 1st and 2nd floors was a high-class casino. How are we going to get in? Jiang Weiwei would ask for Yun Jian's opinion at the critical moment. Now that they were a team, even if Jiang Weiwei didn't like Yun Jian, she wouldn't act alone. What do you think? Yun Jian glanced at Jiang Weiwei. Break in. Jiang Weiwei pressed her hand on the pocket of her Swiss Army knife and said with a sharp look in her eyes, blend in. Yun Jian glanced at her. With that, she messed up her hair and tore her clothes until they were slightly tattered. She even smeared mud on her clothes and fair cheeks. Then, she walked out of the darkness and walked towards the entrance of the building. Jiang Weiwei was stunned. She didn't know what was going on, but she still followed after Yun Jian and dirted her clothes and face. Who are you? The tall gatekeeper stopped Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei in front of the brightly lit casino. Uncle, we're here to look for our father. He took the last bit of our family's savings to gamble here. We've been hungry for 2 days. We're really hungry. Mom is sick too. We don't have anything to eat, so we can only look for our father. Uncle, can you let us in to look for our father? Chapter 243. It had to be said that Yunjian's acting skills were superb. As a secret agent in her previous life, she had been specially trained. Not only did secret agents need the ability to kill in one move, but more importantly, they needed to know how to blend into the crowd and in the other party's life in one move when their guard was down and they were suspicious. Obviously, this was Yunjian's forte. And now, she was planning to blend in here. Perhaps it was because Yunjian's accent was exactly the same as the locals in Country X's H province, coupled with her pitiful appearance and her tattered clothes. Also, Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei were thin and weak to begin with. They really looked like they had been starving for a long time and came from poor families. Therefore, the tall man's heart softened. He and the short man discussed for a while and let Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei enter. Jiang Weiwei only realized after entering the door that Yunjian's acting skills were superb. Moreover, they would not be suspected if they entered the door like this. Yunjian only curled her lips slightly. She and Jiang Weiwei entered the door, turned the corner, and left the sight of the two men at the door. Then, they walked straight to a nearby washroom. Fortunately, there was no one in the corridor. Yunjian quickly entered the washroom with Jiang Weiwei. Yunjian washed the mud off her face quickly and tied her hair tie again. Jiang Weiwei followed suit. Yunjian tidied up her clothes and tried to wipe the mud off her clothes with water. Then she rearranged her clothes. At this moment, Yunjian seemed to have changed into a different person. It was as if the pitiful little girl just now was just an illusion. The torn hem of the dress looked fashionable on Yunjian in an instant. Even if there were some holes, they still had a natural beauty. Jiang Weiwei was dumbfounded. She could do this. However, she saw that Yunjian had already walked to the casino on the second floor. Jiang Weiwei quickly patted the mud off her body and followed her. On the second floor of the casino, groups of gamblers were crowding around the gambling tables, shouting and yelling. The atmosphere was extremely majestic. No one noticed the arrival of Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei at all. Of course, it was not like no one noticed Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei. Yunjian's looks were simply too outstanding. Even without any makeup, her skin still looked shiny and as delicate as a newborn baby's. Hey beautiful, are you alone? A handsome man with short hair walked over and struck up a conversation with Yunjian. No, I'm with my friend. Yunjian smiled generously and pointed at Jiang Weiwei. She was still thinking about how to blend in without leaving a trace, but she didn't expect someone to strike up a conversation with her. This was just as well. The man looked at Yunjian awkwardly. He was a little sorry that he didn't see Jiang Weiwei just now. Chapter 244. Can I make any conditions if I win? Yunjian blinked. Her innocent smile made Miran's heart itch. Jiang Weiwei stood by the side without saying a word. At this moment, she also knew that if she were to face such a scene, she would probably be exposed as soon as she spoke. And Yunjian was actually able to disguise herself to this extent. Even Jiang Weiwei, who didn't have a good impression of Yunjian at the beginning, had to admit that even if she were to believe that Yunjian was an agent of a country trained by a special agent unit, she would believe it. Therefore, Jiang Weiwei didn't say anything. Their mission was to seize that batch of firearms. Right now they were still on a mission, and Jiang Weiwei was with Yunjian. Therefore, no matter how much she hated Yunjian, she wouldn't trip her up. At this juncture, if Yunjian was really exposed, Jiang Weiwei intended to help her. Of course I'm a man. I never lie. Miran patted his chest and promised. He softened his voice and continued to seduce Yunjian. Especially a cute girl like you. How could I bear to lie to you? These rather ambiguous words made Yunjian roll her eyes in her heart. Even Jiang Weiwei felt that Miran was disgusting. However, Neither of them showed their emotions on their faces. But, I don't know how to play this. What should I do? Yunjian glanced at the gambling crowd and said. Miran was confused by Yunjian. He really thought that Yunjian had never gambled before. This was what he meant. Miran chuckled and tried even harder to trick Yunjian. It's okay, I'll teach you. Besides, if you lose, I won't ask for anything too excessive. Of course, it wasn't an excessive request. Miran had already made a plan in his heart. He wanted Yunjian to lose. Then he would lure her step by step and trick her into bed. This was his real goal. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to charm such an innocent student. Of course, if Myron knew that Yunjian was not only the #1 secret agent, slaying God, in her previous life, but she had never met a match in the gambling circle. She was the lady gambler, who was respectfully called the god of gamblers in this circle. Yet she pretended to be a student who did not know how to gamble in front of him. Myron would probably be so angry that he would vomit blood. Yunjian was indeed known as the goddess of gamblers in her previous life. Back then, Yunjian had gambled wildly for an entire night at the internationally renowned Fengyun Casino. She had won a whole month's worth of profits from the Fengyun Casino, a total of $1 billion USD. In the end, Fengyun Casino had no choice but to beg her, the great Buddha, to leave. Okay. Yunjian pretended to be in a difficult position and nodded. Seeing that Yunjian had agreed, Miran became even more excited. At the same time, from Yunjian's expression, he was even more convinced that Yunjian was gambling for the first time. In that case, was there any suspense to the outcome of this gamble? Of course he would win. Come. Let's play over there. Miran led Yunjian to a gambling table. He kicked away the gamblers who were still around the table and politely invited Yunjian to take a seat. Since it's your first time playing, little sister Shaoli, let's play a round of dice. As Miran spoke, he picked up 3 dice and placed them in front of Yunjian. At the same time, he covered the 3 dice with a bowl. Chapter 245. Even the way he addressed Yunjian began to become a little ambiguous. It could be seen that Miran was probably an expert in coaxing little girls. Yunjian smiled contemptuously, but the expression she showed in front of Miran was an innocent and cute little face. At this moment, even Jiang Weiwei couldn't help but twitch in her heart. Fortunately, Miran didn't notice her. Otherwise, with her performance, she would have been seen through long ago. Just shake the bowl like this. Yunjian continued to act like a novice who didn't know anything. Yes, the 3 dice are in the bowl. Shake it however you want, and then we'll guess the size of the dice. Miran narrowed his eyes. He really thought that Yunjian didn't know how to play, so he patiently explained. The dice had 6 faces, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on each of the 6 faces. The 3 dice were shaken under the lid of the bowl. After shaking the bowl, they opened the bowl to see the size of the 3 dice. The gamblers would announce the size of the dice before the dice began to roll. This was a form of gambling in the gambling arena, gambling dice. Mi Luan explained to Yunjian patiently, glancing at her from the corner of his eyes as he asked with a mischievous smirk. Shaoli, do you get it now that I've explained it this way? Understood. Yunjian pretended to be enlightened and nodded at Miran. Then let's begin. Miran narrowed his eyes and spoke in a wretched tone. Little sister Shaoli, do you want to bet big or small? I bet big. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Since Miran wanted to give her a round, why should she reject his good intentions? Bet big. Little sister Shaoli, are you sure? If you bet big, you will lose. Are you sure you want to bet big? Miran said loudly. At the same time, she glanced to the side and said to Yunjian, I'm sure. Yunjian also narrowed her eyes. At the same time, she reached out and covered the bowl with the 3 dice. Miran had done something. In fact, Miran had installed a regulator inside the bowl. The 3 dice were covered in the bowl, and the size of the dice could be controlled. In other words, if Yunjian bet big, the die in the bowl would become small. If Yunjian bet small, the die in the bowl would become big. No matter what, she couldn't win. and the person who controlled the regulator in the bowl was nearby. Coincidentally, Yunjian caught Miluan's glance just now. Following Miran's gaze, she saw a man holding a square remote control beside an inconspicuous washroom in the distance. The man was holding a remote control that could adjust the size of the dice in the bowl in front of her. Miran had just asked Yunjian loudly if she was betting big. She was probably conveying to the man holding the remote control in the distance that she, Yunjian, was going to bet big. Therefore, she asked the man to control the dice in the bowl to be small. He suddenly remembered Yunjian's action of going to the washroom just now. Miran's expression did not change. He stood up fiercely and slammed the table. Then he glared at Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei. His expression suddenly changed. He flipped the gambling table over and shouted in all directions, "Arrest the two of them!" Seeing Miran's sudden change in expression, Yunjian was not in a hurry. She had just been testing Miran. If Miran was stupid, then she would naturally be able to find out about the firearms. Unfortunately, Miran was not stupid. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She watched as the gamblers around the casino ran away in fear. A group of people with guns rushed out from the back of the casino. Her expression did not change. Jiang Weiwei's face turned pale. The underworld here was not like the underworld in Country Z. Chapter 247. A group of Flying Sky Gang brothers with pistols surrounded Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei with Miran as the center. One by one, they pointed their pistols at Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei. Even Jiang Weiwei, who came from a military family and swore not to be afraid of sacrifice since she was young, couldn't help but shiver in the face of these pistols. Miran, who was standing at the front, stopped pretending. He smiled at Yunjian and snorted, "My little sister Shaoli, stop pretending. Ha! I originally wanted to play with you because you were beautiful, but since you came with ill intentions, don't blame us for being impolite." Miran had already listened to the teachings of the Flying Sky Gang's boss. Before the recent arms trade between the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang, anyone who was suspicious had to be cautious when coming into contact with them. That was why when Miran realized that something was wrong, he didn't say anything. He waited until he was sure before making a move. It turned out that Miran was already on guard. Yunjian's lips curled slightly. Jiang Weiwei stood back to back with Yunjian. Compared to Yunjian, Jiang Weiwei never thought that they would be exposed. This seemingly obsessed Miran was actually not as simple as she seemed on the surface. As expected, it was not easy to deceive. But the most despicable thing was that they only had knives in their hands, while the other party had so many people, and everyone was holding pistols. Jiang Weiwei finally knew why Gu Yunjian's tone was heavy when he asked them to complete the mission. However, Jiang Weiwei was also a person who could bend and stretch. She never regretted the choice she had made. At critical moments, she would still throw all personal grudges to the back of her mind. Jiang Weiwei leaned against Yunjian's back and asked Yunjian in a low voice, "What should we do?" "Listen to my instructions." Yunjian also replied to her in a low voice. The interaction between Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei was not seen by Miran and the others. Miran, on the other hand, laughed heartily. One of Miran's subordinates suggested, "Lord Miran, these two women are probably undercover police agents, right? You don't even look at yourself. How dare you behave atrociously in our Flying Sky Gang? Why don't we teach them a lesson? We'll *CK them right here, so that we can have some fun too. What do you think?" Ha ha ha. This was a casino, surrounded by gamblers who did not dare to escape. The dirty words of Miran's subordinate made a group of Miran's other brothers feel restless. Making love with these two women in public, it was probably going to be a different experience. "You dare? Aren't you afraid that our people will avenge us?" Although Jiang Weiwei was a woman who knew when to bow and submit, she would rather commit suicide than be humiliated to death. Thus, she clenched her teeth and said hatefully. Before Miran could speak, his subordinates began to mock Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei on his behalf. "Why wouldn't I dare? TSK, Do you really think our Flying Sky Gang is an ordinary gang? Do you think I'm afraid of your people? Miran's subordinate continued to brag, and then he exaggeratedly used an example to show off the power of his Flying Sky Gang. Do you know Slaying God, the top secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking? Look at how young you two are. I'm sure you don't know. Let me tell you. Even the younger brother of Slaying God, who was known as the strongest secret agent in the secret agent world, was arrested, and Slaying God went missing because of this incident. Our Flying Sky Gang was involved. Don't you think our Flying Sky Gang is powerful? Even a big shot like that was fooled by us. The more this person boasted, the more enthusiastic he became. He looked as if he was afraid that others would not know that he was from the Flying Sky Gang. However, this person did not know the actual facts. He only heard that Slaying God went missing because of this incident, and the Flying Sky Gang was also involved in the incident, so he could not help but exaggerate a little. What no one expected, however, was that Yun Jian's face darkened when she heard the man's words. Chapter 248. Jiang Weiwei stood close to Yun Jian's back. She could feel Yun Jian's body trembling when she heard Miran's subordinates boast. Outsiders did not know that the one thing that Yun Jian regretted the most in her previous life was not looking after her younger brother well. She swore that she would investigate her younger brother's death. It was not that she did not investigate after her rebirth. However, it was as if the incident had been purposely erased. She had been investigating for so long but to no avail. Today, she heard about it from a subordinate of the Flying Apsara Gang. The Flying Apsara Gang was involved in her younger brother's death. Yun Jian was thoroughly enraged. What did I say? Pfft! Don't you understand what I'm saying, little girl? Haha. I'm saying that the Flying Apsara Gang was involved in the murder of the younger brother of the international #1 agent, Slaying God. That kind of character is not something that you and I can imagine. Why? Isn't this enough to show how strong the Flying Apsara Gang is? The last word strong was stuck in his throat. Before Miran's subordinate could finish a string of words, he fell to the ground with a puff and died with a kick of his legs. Everyone was shocked by the turn of events. There was a blade stuck in the neck of the dead man, who suddenly fell to the ground. The blade was 3 inches into the neck, and the force was enough to kill someone on the spot. For someone to be able to exert such strength, other than an assassin, it would be a special agent. The group looked in the direction where the flying dagger came from, and saw Yun Jian playing with the flying dagger that came out of nowhere. Murder! Her blade can kill people. At that moment, a gambler lost control and exclaimed. There was a hint of horror in his words and his fear of Yun Jian. Miran and the rest were scared out of their wits by Yun Jian's action. No one saw how Yun Jian attacked earlier, but she had already killed someone. Kill her. Shoot them. Miran pointed at Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei and yelled at his subordinates. At this moment, how could Miran still want to play with Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei? She was someone who could kill someone right in front of everyone's eyes without letting anyone see how she did it. How terrifying was it? However, before Miran could react, Yun Jian had already moved. Her figure quickly shuttled between Miran's group of men, who were still loading their guns. Wherever Yun Jian passed, people would fall to the ground and die. Until later, Miran's subordinates all died miserably. All of them had one thing in common. Their throats had been slit. Yun Jian held the butterfly knife that she had taken out from her waist at some unknown time. A drop of blood dripped from the tip of the knife as she walked towards Miran. So what if you have guns? You guys who don't know how to use guns are still a bunch of trash. Yun Jian shouted. This bald man had thick eyebrows and small eyes. He looked a little shifty-eyed. Although he looked like a street thug, the bald man was actually the boss of the Flying Sky Gang, Nick. Nick's solemn expression made the group of elders and high-ranking members of the Flying Sky Gang feel respect for him. This batch of firearms in our hands has attracted the attention of the police from various countries. Therefore, in the next few days, we must remain vigilant until our deal with the Iron Lock Gang is successful. Nick slammed the table and said with a serious frown. However, before he could finish, the door in front of him was kicked open. A young girl with long hair burst through the door. Then, a bright throwing knife flew over the heads of all the high-ranking members and stabbed into Nick's table. Chapter 250. The people in the conference room on the 5th floor didn't notice anything that happened in the casino on the 2nd floor. It had to be said that as the boss of the Flying Sky Gang, Nick had installed thick soundproof walls around the conference room. No matter how loud the commotion on the 2nd floor was, he couldn't hear anything in the conference room on the 5th floor. So just now, Yunjian killed Miran and the others and caused a big commotion. But Nick and the others were still having a meeting. Therefore, when Yunjian barged in and stabbed a flying dagger into the table in front of Nick, while spouting her insolent words, everyone was terrified. Although Nick was frightened by Yunjian's throwing knife, he was still someone who had seen a big scene. When he saw Yunjian's appearance and age, he slammed the table and stood up for his prestige. He retorted to Yunjian, "Who are you? How dare you barge into my Flying Sky Gang's conference room and spout nonsense about taking the lives of my Flying Sky Gang's higher-ups? Little girl, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak whatever you want. Young and frivolous, you can't do anything good. Today, you dare to offend my Flying Sky Gang, so you must pay the price." As the boss of the Flying Sky Gang, Nick saw that the person who came was a young girl in her teens. In addition, he was in front of his subordinates, so he had to put on a good show. That was why he slammed the table and stood up, shouting at Yunjian. Hee. Facing Nick, Yunjian didn't have the slightest fear, nor did she bother to retaliate with words. She looked at Nick, and the scene of her brother's head being thrown at her by Lang Sha in her previous life flashed before her eyes. Her brother was still so young, but he had become a stepping stone for these people. He didn't even have a complete corpse when he died. And all of this, the Flying Sky Gang led by Nick was also involved. Her cruel eyes flashed, and then she swung her hand, shooting blades in all directions. Several of the higher-ups closest to Yunjian were instantly obliterated. This little girl really killed people. It wasn't a joke. The rest of the people, including Nick, were stunned. It was especially so for Nick, who had only just recalled that Yunjian had flung the blade on the table in front of him in the beginning. Nick was so scared that he rolled off the podium. No. Let's talk this out. Nick was scared silly when he saw that Yunjian had taken the lives of several higher-ups. Even if he was a fool, he could tell that Yunjian was skilled, so he quickly begged for mercy. Little girl, I didn't recognize Mount Tai just now and offended you. Please don't hold it against me. Nick's attitude changed too quickly. At the same time, he revealed a strange yet friendly smile and looked at Yunjian. Little sister, our Flying Sky Gang has no enmity with you. Why are you making things difficult for us? Right? How about this? You can leave. We promise not to pursue this matter, okay? Yunjian narrowed her eyes at Nick's words. No enmity. Yunjian repeated Nick's words through gritted teeth. Do you know Slaying God, the #1 in the international secret agent ranking? Yunjian raised her brow and looked at Nick and the rest with a chuckle. Nick's eyelids twitched, but he managed to react in time. He gulped and asked, Why? Answer me. Yunjian swung her arm, and another flying knife pierced the neck of a higher-up. Another life was lost. The group of higher-ups had retreated to a corner. Everyone was trembling, afraid that they would be the next to die. This little girl was too scary. She took a life with just one move. I know, of course. Nick gulped, hastily replying, afraid that Yunjian would kill the higher-ups in his gang again. He had a bad feeling about this. Yunjian chuckled and looked at the group of people, as if she was looking at dead people. She said without holding back, Since you know Slaying God, the #1 on the secret agent ranking, I'm sure you're familiar with the incident where Slaying God's brother was used as a hostage to threaten her, right? I forgot that Flying Sky Gang was involved in this as well. Then I think we're considered to have a blood feud now. As Yunjian spoke, she clasped her hands together, and a cracking sound was heard from her knuckles. She was trying to hide her words. However, everyone present could tell what she was trying to say. Could this little girl in front of them be the famous number 1 on the secret agent ranking? The most powerful secret agent king, slaying God? After Nick heard Yunjian's words, he fell to the ground in shock. Slaying God, the number 1 on the international secret agent ranking, the most powerful kosher mercenaries boss. Hearing Yunjian's words, Nick immediately recalled. He was really afraid that Yunjian would go back on her words and kill them. So he immediately said, "It's the people from the Inferno Ring." The Inferno Ring was the 3rd largest assassin organization, after the Hun organization, and the kosher mercenaries. The Inferno Ring. Yunjian raised her eyebrows and hummed softly. A murderous intent flashed in her eyes, as she lowered her head to look at Nick, who was kneeling before her. "Huh. Then you can go to hell. You said you wouldn't kill me." Nick's eyes widened as he stepped back in fear. He did not expect Yunjian to go back on her words. "I did say that I'll let you go as long as you tell me which organization forced you to join. But didn't anyone tell you that you must die after knowing my identity?" Yunjian chuckled, her eyes bloodshot. Then, Yunjian flipped her palm, and the butterfly knife nimbly appeared in her palm. The killing began. Chapter 252. Yunjian's eyes were bloodshot. She knew that these people were the ones who had caused her brother's tragic death, so she wanted to die a quick death. She's slaying God had always been protective. Her brother's death had always been a knot in her heart. Therefore, the higher-ups of the Flying Sky Gang, who had participated in her brother's matter, must pay the price for their actions. In the hotel, Lu Shiyin and the rest were shocked when they heard what Jiang Weiwei, who had returned first, said. Jiang Weiwei told them about how they had exposed their whereabouts, including how Yunjian had killed Mi Luan and the rest. After the shock, Lu Shiyin, as the captain, was naturally the calmest. He frowned and said to everyone, "Since our whereabouts have been exposed, we must take other measures to seize that batch of firearms. No need." Just then, the door outside the room opened and Yunjian walked in. "Yunjian, little girl, where have you been? Why are you only back now?" "I was shocked when I saw that only Jiang Weiwei had returned. I was afraid that something had happened to you." Chu Ning was relieved when she saw Yunjian return. Jiang Weiwei did not explain why Yunjian did not return with her. Yunjian winked at Chu Ning discreetly, then looked at the rest and continued, "I've found that batch of firearms. We can go get it now." Naturally, Lu Shiyin and his men did not know that Yunjian had already wiped out the Go-Go Gang's higher-ups, including their boss. The usually quiet vice captain Hong Fan could not help but ask Yunjian, "Are we going to get it now? There are thousands of people in the Flying Sky Gang, not to mention that their boss is no pushover. Even our commander, Ge Junjian, won't attack the Flying Sky Gang easily. Are we going to get it now? Are you sure it'll work?" Idiot Hong. Since little sister Yunjian said that we can go get it, of course, there's a reason for it. Chu Xiangnan, who was standing next to Hong Fan, spoke up for Yunjian, and even nudged Hong Fan with his elbow. Hong Fan was the most meticulous person in the group. At the same time, he loved to study, and was very knowledgeable about technological products. However, he was a man of few words. Therefore, Chu Xiangnan gave him a nickname, Idiot Hong. Hong Fan glared at Chu Xiangnan. He pretended not to hear how Chu Xiangnan addressed him, and turned to look at Yunjian. Hong Fan didn't have any other meaning. He was just used to deducing facts. He believed that it was impossible for the few of them to directly go to the Flying Heavens faction's territory to retrieve the firearms. Yunjian lowered her eyes and said calmly, "The Flying Sky Gang's leader, Nick, and 18 other high-ranking members are dead. The remaining members of the Flying Sky Gang are no longer a threat, so we can go retrieve the firearms and report back to our country." "What? The boss of the Flying Sky Gang is dead? All dead?" A series of exclamations rang out. Everyone looked at Yunjian in shock. The death of a gang's boss and the upper echelons meant that the gang had completely collapsed. Even if there were still people to replace them in the later stages, That was only the later stages. At least for now. It was absolutely easy for them to steal the firearms. Oh my God. They had just arrived for the mission. They hadn't even been here for half a day. And the result? The mission was almost completed. Even the official Advanced Special Forces soldiers had a hard time carrying out this mission. But they completed it in less than a day? Was this a dream? Just then, Lu Shiyan fell silent for a moment. He realized something and suddenly asked Yun Jian, the boss and high-ranking members of the Flying Sky Gang. Were you the one who killed them? There was a hint of shock in his voice. Chapter 253. Only God knew how shocked they were when Yun Jian nodded. Yun Jian was the latest to join the team, and was also the youngest. In the cross-country run earlier, she might have gotten first place because of her developed motor nerves and good stamina. However, at this point, there was no longer anyone who did not believe it. When Jiang Weiwei came back, she told them in detail about how Yun Jian had killed Mi Luan and the rest. Now that Yun Jian had killed the Gogo Gang's senior members, including the gang's boss, Nick, they would not doubt it. They were in disbelief, shock and fear. How terrifying was Yun Jian's skill to be able to do that? Let's steal the firearms while the Gogo Gang is in chaos. You guys know how to drive, right? I've checked it out just now. The firearms are all loaded in trucks, 4 in total. I can drive one. You guys can take the other 3. Yun Jian told them. Lu Shiyan answered quickly, we can. Hongfan Fong Xiaoran. And I have all gotten our driver's licenses. It's no problem for us to drive the trucks. In the outside world, they all addressed each other by code names, but in this room, there was no need for that. What's more, the most dangerous people were already dead. Lu Shiyan did not ask why Yun Jian knew how to drive a truck as well. In fact, Yun Jian had become an omnipotent figure in their hearts. If it were not for her, it would be difficult for them to complete the mission. What more, completing it in less than half a day. Before they departed, Lu Shiyan contacted Ge Junjian. Yun Jian then led them to steal the 4 trucks. There were no obstacles along the way. When they drove out, Ge Junjian, whom they had contacted earlier, had already sent someone to pick them up. They returned home that night. They only returned to Longmen City when it was almost evening the next day, and saw Ge Junjian right away. Looking at Ge Junjian, whom they had just bid farewell to yesterday but met again today, a sense of pride rose within them. They had completed a mission that even the Advanced Special Forces found difficult to complete in less than half a day. They were back again. How could he not be proud? Although all this pride was given to her by Yun Jian, hence they were inwardly grateful to Yun Jian. The first thing Ge Junjian said when he saw everyone was, "Thank you for your hard work." Although the crowd did not see the change in Ge Junjian's expression, it was not difficult to see that Ge Junjian also had mixed feelings. He was right about Yun Jian. But then again, it wasn't strange for someone who could kill Wolf Blade, who was ranked 10th on the international assassin rankings, to have such abilities. Rest well for the next few days. I've already spoken to the school on your behalf, Ge Junjian continued. Also, after this mission is completed, the higher-ups will give you a reward. You will be informed when the time comes. After Ge Junjian finished speaking, he asked someone to drive Yun Jian and the others home one by one. Just as Yun Jian got home, she saw Qin Yiru, who did not go to work, packing a bunch of things. She even stuffed them into an old bag and was about to leave with it. "Mom, where are you going?" Yun Jian asked. "Xiao Jian, you're back?" Qin Yiru looked up at Yun Jian tiredly and chuckled dryly. "Your dad has returned to Xinjiang town. I'm planning to go there with my documents to look for him and sign the divorce agreement to get a divorce." Yin Gang had returned to Xinjiang town? Yun Jian frowned subtly. Yun Jian did not even keep quiet as she told Qin Yiru, "Mom, I'll go with you." Yun Jian was worried that Yun Gang and her aggressive grandmother in name, Lu Lanhua, would bully Qin Yiru if she did not go with Qin Yiru. Chapter 254. Qin Yiru did not refuse this time. After the previous incident, she no longer treated Yun Jian as a child. Moreover, She was not confident about going back alone. After all, with her mother-in-law Lu Lanhua's shrewish personality, if they really got into a fight, it was unknown whether the divorce would go through. If Yun Jian went back with her, it would give Qin Yiru a sense of security. Okay. Qin Yiru nodded. Then let's go take the bus now. Okay. Yun Jian agreed. She reached out to take Qin Yiru's bag. Mom, let me take it. Qin Yiru was gratified and let Yun Jian take the bag from her. Qin Yiru and Yun Jian went to the bus station to board the bus back to Xinjiang town. It was the last bus in winter. Qin Yiru had planned to take the bus home today, and then return to her parents' house to stay the night. She would visit her parents' house while she was at it. She would then go to Yungang's Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow morning to get a divorce. Qin Yiru had returned to Xinjiang town before the sky turned dark, because she would only knock off in the evening. She did not plan to work overtime today, so she had applied for leave the next morning. Once she was done with the divorce, she would rush back to work immediately, so she only delayed her work by half a day. She planned to return to her parents' house to stay the night. Although Qin Yiru's parents' house was not good, it was still her parents' house. At the end of the day, she had to be filial to her mother, because her mother was the one who raised her. No matter how disharmonious they were, she could not lose her filial piety. Qin Yiru and Yun Jian only arrived at Xinjiang town when it was already dark. Qin Yiru carried a big bag of fruits back to her parents' house. When she opened the door to her parents' house, she looked around but did not see anyone. It's probably because your grandmother and the rest aren't here, Qin Yiru mumbled softly to herself. Yun Jian did not want to come here. After all, Zhang Meihua's family had treated Qin Yiru and her like that. However, according to Qin Yiru, she was still her mother no matter what. She still had to show her filial piety. At most, she would avoid contact with her in the future. Not long after she said that, a few people walked in. Zhang Meihua and the others came back from the market with a bunch of vegetables, fruits, fish, and meat. It was as if they were going to hold a big banquet. At that moment, they all had smiles on their faces. The cheerful smiles froze abruptly when they saw Yun Jian and Qin Yiru. Fear flashed across their faces. Zhang Meihua. Her face turned green when she saw Yun Jian. Oh God! Why was her terrifying granddaughter here again? The last time Yun Jian threw a flying dagger at them, the scene where the dagger got stuck in the wall was still fresh in their minds. Zhang Meihua in particular had peed her pants on the spot. She still shuddered when she recalled it today. You, why are you guys here? Zhang Meihua was terrified. She took a few steps back and looked at Yun Jian with fear in her eyes. Qin Liqian followed behind Zhang Meihua and stared at Yun Jian fearfully as well. He looked like he had seen a ferocious beast in the river. If others were to see this, they would probably snicker. After all, Zhang Meihua was Yun Jian's grandmother and Qin Liqian was Yun Jian's uncle. Both of them looked panicked and fearful when they saw Yun Jian. It was truly shocking. Mom, don't be scared. Xiao Jian and I came back today to visit you guys. I'm planning to file for divorce with Yin Gang tomorrow morning, so we'd like to stay here for the night. Also, here are some fruits. Xiao Jian and I picked them out from the fruit stall beside the bus stop. They're fresh, so we brought them for you guys to try. Qin Yiru placed the fruits on the table. Zhang Meihua had long felt Yun Jian's threatening gaze. How would she dare to chase them away? The lesson from last time was unforgettable. Okay, stay. Feel free to stay. Zhang Meihua took a few glances at Yun Jian and gulped. Qin Yiru smiled when she heard that. This was her mother after all. Even if she did not like them, she did not wish for them to become enemies. Right, Mom? You guys bought so many things. Are you treating us to dinner? Qin Yiru asked with a glance at the things Zhang Meihua and Zhang Meihua had brought back. Zhang Meihua had calmed down and her attitude was not as harsh as before. Probably due to her fear of Yun Jian, her tone was gentler. It's Fangfang who's coming back to visit her parents today. Chapter 255. Qin Yiru smiled when she heard that Qin Fangfang was coming back. Qin Fangfang was the only one in Qin Yiru's generation who managed to get into university. Even among her peers, Qin Fangfang's grades were the best. Not to mention now, in Qin Yiru's generation, the number of people who managed to get into university could be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, in the past, the villagers all had the feeling that whoever's child could get into university was a talent. Qin Fangfang was undoubtedly a talent. She got into a famous university in another province and settled down there after graduation. In the end, she even met a rich boyfriend and got married in another province. She rarely came back. Qin Fangfang, on the other hand, was the closest to Qin Yiru among the Qins. The two sisters were so close that they could talk about anything. However, Qin Fangfang went to university, worked and got married, so she did not have time to come back. Therefore, their relationship faded as time passed. When Zhang Meihua heard that her youngest daughter was going back home to visit her parents, she was all smiles. Her youngest daughter had always been her pride. She was good at her studies when she was young. Not only did she get into a famous university, she even married a rich man. Oh my, it was said that he was worth millions. His family could even afford to drive a car. In this era, those who could afford to drive a car were definitely from a rich family. Honk honk honk. Not long after, the sound of a car horn came from outside the door. Zhang Meihua heard it and ran out immediately. Qin Yiru pulled Yun Jian and followed Zhang Meihua and the rest out. At this moment, they saw a black Santana outside the door, honking as it drove over. Hearing the honking along the way, some of the neighbors who were at home for a blind date ran out and looked at it with envy. Someone even pointed at the Santana and shouted, "Look, it's a car!" Rich people. In this era, it was rare to see a car in a small town like Xinjiang town. Even if there was a car, it would only be driven back by the rich who went out to work. In the entire town, there were probably only one or two families who could afford to drive a car. Therefore, when Zhang Meihua heard the neighbors' praises, her face was full of smiles and pride. That was her son-in-law's car. The sedan was also honking loudly as it drove all the way to the door. The passenger door of the car opened, and a fashionably dressed woman got out of the Santana. "Mom, sis, you're all here." The woman saw Zhang Meihua and Qin Yiru and shouted in surprise. This fashionably dressed woman was undoubtedly Qin Fangfang, Qin Yiru's sister and Yun Jian's aunt. She looked happy just a moment to come back. She frowned her face, who was just radiant just now, instantly her face, who was just now she was too, who was just a moment ago, she was she, who was just a moment ago she. Her to us to look she was to her to be, was to be too's. "No, it's the same as the last time I saw you." Qin Yiru chuckled awkwardly, trying to ease the tension. "You have to take good care of yourself." Qin Fangfang consoled Qin Yiru. She then noticed Yun Jian, who was standing beside Qin Yiru. She took a few glances at Yun Jian and exclaimed in surprise, "Ah, is this Xiao Jian? You've grown so big." "Xiao Jian, this is your aunt. Quick, greet her." Qin Yiru nudged Yun Jian with a smile. Yun Jian had a good impression of Qin Fangfang when she saw how well she treated Qin Yiru. "Auntie," Yun Jian called out. "Oh, good girl." Qin Fangfang beamed. "Oh my, what is this lousy place? It's so shabby. Fangfang, come over quick." A wealthy woman in her 50s or 60s alighted from the Santana. She was dressed in branded fur, and her tone was indescribably smug. This person was Qin Fangfang's mother-in-law, Zhu Hengxiang. Zhang Meihua asked as she filled Sun Baiwen's third bowl of rice. After all, Qin Fangfang's family seldom came back, and Zhu Hengxiang was never willing to come here. Therefore, Zhang Meihua felt very strange. "Yes, there is." Sun Baiwen smiled and scratched his head, continuing, "Didn't we hear that Longmen City is going to hold an auto show soon? I heard that it's the biggest one in the country. It's going to be an exhibition of hundreds and thousands of luxury cars. We probably won't see it even once in a few decades. Our family sells cars as well, so we followed the trend and came to take a look." Zhang Meihua knew that Sun Baiwen's family made a fortune selling cars as well. "Are you serious? There's an auto show of this scale in Longmen City?" How much money does it cost to hold a party like this? Qin Liqian shouted excitedly when he heard that. Longmen City Auto Show. Yin Jian's eyelid twitched when she heard the name. It seemed that Zhang Jifan had done his job of promoting it. Even people outside the province had heard about it. Chapter 257. In reality, Zhang Jifan had already reorganized the entire storefront. At the same time, he had reserved a huge space for the car exhibition. The car exhibition was set to be held 5 days later. As for the other related personnel, and all the arrangements, Zhang Jifan had already made the necessary arrangements. Yun Jian was also relieved to hand new crews over to Zhang Jifan to manage. Obviously, Zhang Jifan did not disappoint. Of course it's true. There's a lot of publicity for the car exhibition this time. There will be hundreds to thousands of luxury cars. As long as you name a car, it'll be an eye-opener at the car exhibition. Sun Baiwen shouted excitedly. Zhang Meihua and the rest booed the moment Sun Baiwen said that. Zhu Hengxiang snickered when she saw that her son's words had caused an uproar among the crowd. Heh, what a bunch of ignorant people. The dinner was filled with men talking about men's affairs. The women chatted about women's daily life. Qin Yiru and Qin Fangfang had not seen each other for a long time. The two sisters were having a great time talking. Yun Jian, on the other hand, was stuffing her mouth with fish and meat without saying a word. Sigh. At this moment, Sun Baiwen sighed and said, "It's a pity that the auto show this time requires an invitation. Not everyone can enter." Qin Fangfang felt sad when she heard Sun Baiwen's disappointed gaze. Don't be discouraged. There are still 5 days until the car exhibition. Let's go find out how to get the invitation. If there's really no other way, we can just take a look outside the car exhibition. Let's give it a try. Qin Fangfang turned to look at her husband, Sun Baiwen, and stopped talking to Qin Yiru. Sun Baiwen looked at his wife Qin Fangfang's comforting voice and instantly warmed up. Is this the invitation to the car exhibition? Qin Yiru thought about it for a few seconds. She suddenly grabbed her bag and took out about 10 cards with a high-end sports car printed on the front and New Cruise Auto Show invitation, written on the back. Sun Baiwen unconsciously glanced at the cards in Qin Yiru's hand, and he stood up in surprise. A sense of astonishment filled his heart. Right. This is the invitation letter for New Cruise's auto show. But why do you have it? And you have at least a dozen invitations in your hands. New Cruise only sent out 1,000 invitations to the outside world. And those who were invited were all leaders of the business world Long Shao. Even we didn't have the right to be invited. Sun Baiwen stared at the invitations that Qin Yiru had taken out in shock, stupefied. The auto exhibition organized by New Cruise this time only invited the rich or powerful bosses. Even those big bosses only had one invitation letter in their hands at most. There were already people in the market who were buying the invitation cards at high prices just to witness the splendor of the country's largest auto show. One invitation card could be sold at a sky-high price. However, the problem was that many big bosses refused to sell the invitation cards because they wanted to witness the show's splendor. Under such circumstances, it was shocking that Qin Yiru could take out more than 10 invitations at once. Everyone looked at Qin Yiru in shock. I was given these by the manager of New Cruise when I was working there. He said that I could ask my relatives and friends to take a look. I don't know what these are, and I didn't plan to attend such an event. I was planning to throw them away in a few days. Qin Yiru was stunned as well. She did not expect the invitation cards in her hand to be so important. You work at New Cruise? Sun Baiwen asked in shock, as if he had discovered a new continent. Yes, I'm just a cleaning lady. Qin Yiru was at a loss. Cleaning lady, you got more than 10 invitations? Sun Baiwen almost fainted from the shock. He had thought of many ways to get an invitation card before he came, but he could not do anything in the end. Chapter 258. Qin Yiru did not understand the question, but she nodded blankly. Yun Jian, who was sitting next to Qin Yiru, paused as she held a small cup of water. A faint smile spread across her lips. She took a sip of water and gulped it down. Qin Yiru's invitation was naturally given to her by the manager of new cruise. At the same time, Yun Jian had also instructed Zhang Zhifan to hire more cleaning ladies, so that Qin Yiru's area would be divided into the smallest area. Now, Qin Yiru's daily work was more relaxed than those graduates from prestigious universities who came out to work in the office. Moreover, a monthly salary of 1,500 yuan was not considered low in 1998. That was why Qin Yiru was able to save money after deducting her monthly expenses. Why don't you guys take these invitations? I don't need them anyway. I won't attend that kind of event. Qin Yiru generously placed the invitations on the table and pushed them to Sun Baiwen. When Sun Baiwen's mother, Zhu Hingxiang, saw this, she quickly reached out to take them. However, Sun Baiwen reached out to stop her. We only need one. One invitation will allow our whole family to go in and watch the car show. Sun Baiwen only took one of the invitations and returned the rest to Qin Yiru in a friendly manner. He even thanked Qin Yiru politely. Thank you, sister. One invitation would allow their whole family to go in and watch the car show. As long as one person had one invitation, they could bring their family and friends to visit. There was no limit to the number of people they could bring. This was also an idea that Yun Jian came up with. The cars she sold were targeted at the big bosses. Even if ordinary people went, they would not be able to afford them. This was not to say that Yun Jian looked down on the poor, but it was a business concept. Of course, if the big bosses brought their family and friends to visit, it would be very different. Usually the family and friends of the big bosses would not be too poor. Especially the friends of the big bosses. They would only become friends because they were in the same circle. Therefore, most of them had families that could afford cars. Therefore, if these people went, they would most likely spend money to buy cars in the future. After dinner, the sky was completely dark. However, Xinjiang town had street lights at night, so there was no need to worry about the dark. Qin Fangfang dragged Qin Yiru out for a walk. At night, Qin Fangfang requested to sleep with Qin Yiru. The two sisters had a lot of things to talk about since they were rarely together. Fortunately, there were plenty of rooms in Zhang Meihua's house, so she arranged one for Yun Jian. Although Sun Baiwen couldn't hug his wife to sleep for the whole night, he could understand Qin Fangfang very well, so he agreed. The next morning, Yun Jian returned to her first home since her rebirth with Qin Yiru. At the door, she also saw Yun Gang, her irresponsible father, whom she had met not long ago in the casino. Qin Yiru wanted to divorce Yun Gang, but Yun Gang refused. In the end, it was Yun Jian's grandfather, Yun Zhong, who felt that his son had ruined the family and forced him to sign the divorce agreement. It was only then that the matter was settled. The matter was finally settled. When the Civil Affairs Bureau was done with the last step, Qin Yiru took a few deep breaths. The weather today was similar to when she and Yun Gang registered their marriage. The sun was high up in the sky. Under the sunlight, there was a hint of warmth amidst the cold. To be honest, she had lived with Yun Gang for so many years. It would be a lie to say that she had no feelings for him. However, as time went by, Yun Gang committed more and more mistakes. Her patience had been worn out. Yun Jian held Qin Yiru's hand. Holding her mother's rough hand, Qin Yiru made their way to the bus stop back to Longmen City. She swore that she would never let Qin Yiru suffer in the future. Chapter 259. After returning to Longmen City, Yun Jian had a few more carefree days. Soon it was the day of the auto show. In the morning, Yun Jian was already awake when the sun was still rising. She had asked Zhang Xiaofeng and Chen Sini to watch the auto show together. Ling Yichen was also tagging along. Both Zhang Xiaofeng and Ling Yichen were boys, so it was only natural that they were fond of racing and machinery. Once they heard that Yun Jian asked if they were interested in watching the auto show, they agreed without hesitation. When they found out that the auto show this time was the largest auto show in the country organized by New Cruise, which had been in the limelight recently, Zhang Xiaofeng and Ling Yichen were dumbfounded. "Master, do you have an invitation for this place?" Standing at the entrance of the auto show, Zhang Xiaofeng glanced at Yun Jian and asked with a twitch of his lips as he watched the guards checking the invitations. No. Yun Jian smiled breezily and led the way. Oh no. Huh. No. How did we get in if we didn't? Hey master, wait for us. Zhang Xiaofeng did not react for a moment before he caught up to Yun Jian's light steps with Chen Xini, who had been giggling with a hand over her mouth, and Ling Yichen, who was glaring at him. When they reached the entrance where the invitations were checked, Yun Jian and the rest were stopped. The guard did not recognize Yun Jian and assumed that Yun Jian and the rest were naughty kids and stopped them on the spot. His tone was not pleasant either. This is an auto show, not a place for kids to play. Little girls and little boys, did you come to the wrong place? The guard thought that he was the one who was checking the invitations for the auto show, so he was feeling smug. He spoke to Yun Jian and the rest in a dignified and confident manner. Yun Jian did not have an invitation because she did not bring it with her, and there was no need for it. Ignoring the gatekeeper, Yun Jian typed a message on her phone and sent it out. Not long after, a strong man rushed out of the door. The person in charge was one of Zhang Jifan's brothers. He had followed Zhang Jifan out of Xinjiang town. The person's surname was Wu. Steward Wu was in charge of maintaining order in the venue. Receiving Zhang Jifan's instruction that Sister Jian was here, he put down what he was doing and rushed out. Walking to Yun Jian, Steward Wu bent down to look at Yun Jian with a smile, addressing her respectfully in front of everyone. Sister Jian, you're here. Why didn't you come in directly? We've been waiting for you for a long time. When the gatekeeper saw that his superior had come, he was going to complain to Yun Jian and the other kids for not leaving. Unexpectedly, Steward Wu went to Yun Jian and addressed her as Sister Jian. Sister? Could it be that the girl he stopped had a higher status than Steward Wu? I was stopped, so I had to ask you to come out. Chapter 260. On the other side, Yun Jian, who had successfully entered the auto show, led Zhang Xiaofeng, Ling Yichen, and Chen Xini around. Master, I didn't expect the person in charge of this auto show to call you Sister Jian. Zhang Xiaofeng could not help grumbling. Yun Jian merely smiled without saying anything. The scale of this auto show was huge. Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two had been exclaiming since they entered the entrance. Oh my God! The world-famous cars that we used to only see in drawings can all be seen here. I think this must be the biggest auto show that's been held in our country so far. I really don't know who organized such a grand auto show. Ling Yichen cried out in surprise. These cars are secondary. There are 3 international limited edition supercars at the front hall. Do you guys want to go take a look? Yun Jian asked with a raised brow at the trio's ecstatic expressions. Wow, really? We're going. Zhang Xiaofeng shouted. With Yun Jian leading the way, the group went to the front hall. The 3 limited edition supercars at the front hall were actually the highlight of this auto show. They were the reason why both insiders and outsiders wanted to catch a glimpse of their splendor. There were only a handful of limited edition supercars in the world. As for the limited edition supercars, even some rich tycoons would find it hard to buy them. It was even more priceless in the market. Moreover, it was an auto show with 3 limited edition supercars as the highlight. How could it not attract the attention of the tycoons? The 3 limited edition supercars in the front hall were already surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. Everyone was looking at the 3 limited edition supercars with a sense of possessiveness. By the time Yun Jian and the others arrived, the place was already crowded. On the other hand, the 3 limited edition supercars were surrounded by a protective fence. The people around them only knew how to admire the cars. There was no commentator for the 3 limited edition supercars. First, it was because they were limited edition supercars. Most of the commentators would have a hard time describing the cars in a captivating manner. Secondly, it was because this was a supercar. The commentators themselves had never had the chance to touch it, so it was even harder for them to talk about it. Yun Jian saw many familiar faces in the crowd, including Mayor Gu, the mafia boss Su Zetian, and others who had been invited. She pursed her lips. Just as she was about to lead Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two over, she heard Qin Fangfang's voice. Xiao Jian, are you here for a visit too? Is your mother here? Qin Fangfang stopped Yun Jian when she saw her. When Yun Jian saw that it was her aunt Qin Fangfang and the others, she nodded and said, My mom didn't come. She didn't go to work today. She said that today's event was too lively, so she didn't want to join in the fun. Hearing that her sister did not come, Qin Fangfang could not help but feel disappointed for a while. A sarcastic voice then rang. Hey Fangfang, this is your sister's daughter who gave your family an invitation to the auto show and is now working as a cleaner in New Cruise, right? Yun Jian heard the sharp and malicious voice. Squinting her eyes, she saw a woman dressed to the nines standing beside Zhu Hengxiang. The woman was actually Zhu Hengxiang's biological daughter, Qin Fangfang's sister-in-law, Sun Baiyan. Beside Sun Baiyan was a man with a beer belly. It was Sun Baiyan's husband Jiang Xingnan. When Qin Yiru gave Sun Baiwan an invitation, Zhu Hengxiang called her married daughter and son-in-law to come over immediately, saying that she wanted to watch the auto show. Sun Baiwan was helpless, but he could only go along with his mother. Sun Baiyan was exactly the same as her mother, Zhu Hengxiang. She had been pampered and spoiled since she was young, and had always been high and mighty. Qin Fangfang frowned when she heard Sun Baiyan's unpleasant words. Sun Baiyan, don't you spout nonsense in front of the child. Qin Fangfang could not help shouting. I'm not spouting nonsense. Ha, her mother is a cleaner in New Cruise. It's the truth. Can I talk about it? TSK. No matter how noble some people pretend to be, they can't change the fact that they came from a poor village. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.